Okay. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Yeah, here we go. Here we go.
It's
Here we
time
go.
for the old time happy hour. So pick up your step and smile a while.
I cannot smile a while when I've got to face the Eagles and the Commandos in the NFC title game next week. Hello, everybody. Terry Bennett, intern Noe, the commissioner, as we're here to talk a little pro football, watch a little college football, or I guess as some people are calling it, watch a little minor league football championship series here as Notre Dame and Ohio State take on each other. And by the way, I want to point out intern Noe, the commissioner. I'm just going to keep calling you intern Noe, the commissioner. I like it that way. I feel that the NFL committee got it so wrong with Detroit being the number 1 seed. Obviously, they didn't earn it. So maybe next year, the NFL committee can do better at that, We'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about the epic Ravens-Bills game. The Texans played as well. How crappy was that game? But other than that, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing well. I didn't say what are you drinking because I'm honestly drinking water today. I'll go ahead and say that right now. We didn't have a show last week because the studio got hit with the flu bug, and while I'm better, like way better, I'm still like kind of not really ready to partake in the spirits. But what are you drinking?
I'm doing Weller Special Reserve. I went to the store over the weekend and I was looking for anything, and Weller is hard to find around here, so if I can find it, I buy it. So I bought that, and it's pretty good. It's like it's a wheated bourbon. How about? Well, yeah, you're drinking water. Never mind.
I'm drinking Walmart brand bottled water for this week. Probably will actually be taking off from show drinking until probably the Super Bowl. You're going to be in studio for the Super Bowl. We got some really cool things planned on that. We'll be talking a little bit more about that later on this week and next week. So just right off the top, what were your thoughts on the NFL weekend that was?
I mean, the night games were good each day, and the day games were meh. I got all 4 of the games wrong. I predicted the losers would win, and they did not. But yeah, I mean, Washington, they did well. I was surprised by how consistent they were from start to end. Baltimore and Buffalo was as good as I thought it'd be. A little disappointed with how the Ravens executed in the first half, but they kind of course corrected in the second half. But it was just too little too late for them.
Well, I'm not saying that you can't count Lamar Jackson's mistakes in the first half because they put them behind the 8 ball, but he had an epic second half. I think he was like 12 of 14 for 170 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think 3 big mistakes, and unfortunately for Mark Andrews, a guy that I like because I've had him in fantasy in multiple leagues for the last 3 years, and I like him. But he's had a propensity to make these kind of bad drops at bad times, like he did. And of course, we'll get into that here later. I think Harbaugh, the go for 2, I thought that was a little interesting when he called it. I didn't hate it. I just thought it was interesting when he called it. The Houston Kansas City game. That game was really closer than you think, but in any moment did I ever think the Texans had a chance. And we'll of course and if you don't know, this is Outdrink the Coverage Happy Hour. We talk sports right now. With it being in football, of course, we're weekly. We're also going to be watching at the national championship game that's going to start here in about 7 minutes. So that'll be part of the show. We're not going to watch all the way through unless it's just a really, really good game. We'll probably do the normal, go a couple hours on the show like we normally do. But as soon as you could tell that the Texans couldn't protect C.J. Stroud, I never thought they had a chance.
Yeah, even when the game was close, I still never thought that Houston could go and drive and score a touchdown. It's just unfortunate. They have the defense that could get you to a Super Bowl, but their offensive line is just garbage. And Karlaftis was just having a field day. You can't have Dalton Schultz, their tight end, guarding George Karlaftis. He's blossomed into one of the premier pass rushers in the NFL. I mean, I will say, just like with Baltimore, Kansas City, they just know how to draft players like a Leo Chanel and a
Yeah.
Karloff. They're not going to be all pros every year, maybe 1 or 2 years. They might get a couple of Pro Bowlers, but they're always going to be consistently good. And they have just like with that block kicks. Chanel blocked that kick, by the way, on Kaimi Fairbairn, who had a uncharacteristically bad game. I was really sad.
Yeah.
I felt really bad for him. He's a really good kicker for the Texans. Uh, Man, it's tough because the Texans are knocking on the door. They just they just line. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying, are they? I mean, there was this big funny meme rolling around after the last week win, like, CJ Stroud in 2 years has as many playoff wins as Dak Prescott in 7 years or 9 years or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but he hasn't gone any further. He's just won 2 first-round games, and they lose the games the exact same way. Like, to me, I see no growth from last year. In fact, I think there was a regression. Like, I contend that if they were in any other division in the AFC, they probably don't make the playoffs.
No,
And
that's very possible. But all I'm saying, I'm just going to give them the benefit of the doubt just because I saw the line play and it was pretty terrible.
Well, I know, but I mean, it's kind of been a thing now since the beginning of the franchise. It's weird how, you and I talked about this in random, like Pittsburgh always has a tough D in a running game. And Baltimore, even though their defense at times gets a little overrated, like the 2012 Super Bowl team, go look that up, folks. That defense was not as good as what people think. Joe Flacco had a magical Super Bowl run that might not ever be matched again. But you still think of that. With the Cowboys, you think of quarterback and things like that. And with Houston, the negative is they just never seem to have an offensive line that works for like 2 years. Like they'll get 2 years of solid and then things will start to break down. And some of it's not like it's their fault. It's injuries. It's guys who are, good, but never quite reach as great as people think they would, things like that, which is kind of funny because the very first guy that they picked in the supplemental draft as a franchise was a guy who, when he played, was one of the best tackles to maybe ever play, but he was hurt for the whole time. And I contend that maybe the Hall of Fame credentials shouldn't be there. But anyway, point is I don't know. I just felt like Houston, this is what Houston does. They're going to win the South. The South isn't that good, and they're going to get beat in the first. Or they're going to win a first-round game possibly, and then they're going to get beat in the division round. They're Dallas. Houston is Dallas right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, honestly, going into the offseason, Texans just need to focus on upgrading that offensive line, get another running back. And I think that's it, really. And I think as long as they sweep their division, now, to me, I know you and I disagree on this, but I think the Colts hiring Lou Anarumo as their new DC, he was a former Bengal defensive coordinator. Now, this year was pretty bad for the Bengals, but you have to look at what he did from 21 to 23 with that defense. You have to say, hey, if he has some type of talent on there, and they have Zaire Franklin, they have some talent. They have Buckner along the line. I think the Colts could be a surprise team next year. Assuming that Anthony Richardson actually, grows up and doesn't get tired and has to take off a play.
Well, I don't have a problem with the hire. He's just a mad coach to me. I even said to you in chat, he's a good, solid, average coach. If he has the talent like he had in 2019 when he took over with Cincinnati, you could see what he did. When he doesn't really do a good job of hiding his weaknesses or scheming that. And I just think with the Colts, they're going to have to hit on some drafts and free agent signings because I think they have a couple pieces. But I also think they've got an issue with quitting because that's the thing that I saw when they lost the game where they needed to win. The offense was trying to answer every time, and that defense just looked like they were like, yeah, we don't really care. And so I think you're going to have to, you can say, well, the coaching change will fix that. Yeah, but when the head coach is still there, he's not going to forget those that quit. And it's really, really hard to get that, forget that memory. So I think the Colts might be going on some wholesale defensive changes, which is not a bad thing.
Oh, they need to have the biggest question mark is their quarterback. They need to see if Anthony Richardson is their guy for the future. I wasn't that impressed this year with him.
Yeah, no, but I agree. But I just mean on the defensive side. Yeah, and I think what you've got to do next year is you've got to say, okay, you've got 10 games. You're the guy for 10 games. Go.
Yeah.
And just let him go. I mean, look at what's happened in Carolina. Bryce Young now all of a sudden looks like the guy that they thought he would be. And by the way, I will say I think one of the things Houston has to figure out is CJ Stroud. He took a big step back. Like he just, and yes, we could say the offensive line is part of that. I don't disagree, but still, I think there needs to be some mental adjusting there with him. Probably rebuild back a little bit of his confidence, and things like that. Because and it is eerily, and this is why, folks, you got to tap the brakes on Jaden Daniels. Even though look at what he done his rookie year, and all jokes aside. Dak Prescott is an Aaron Rodgers third and what the hell throw on a first down to possibly being in the NFC title game back on his rookie year. Again, I know we all want to heap on Dak and what he hasn't done in the playoffs, but let's not forget his very first playoff game, he struggled in the first quarter and then got on fire and dragged Dallas into should have been at least an OT. And then Aaron Rodgers completes, 3rd and 17 or whatever it was, and they end up kicking the game-winning field goal. I mean, and then he regressed the next year. CJ Stroud, first year, he's a wonderkind. Holy crap. He regressed the second year. I want to say RG3, but RG3 regressed because of knee injury. He will always be for the last 20 years, the great what if. Like, what if RG3 would have stayed healthy? But we got to see if Jaden Daniels, what he'll do next year with that step. But hey, he's now put himself with Big Ben and Mark Sanchez as a rookie. Speaking of, look at what Mark Sanchez.
Flacco too.
Huh?
Flacco too.
Yeah, Flacco too. Oh yeah, Flacco did go to AFC title game as rookie.
Him and Sanchez did it back-to-back years. That's why people forget about Flacco, but remember Sanchez because that was even more remarkable.
But it was ugly and it was weird. And I'm still waiting on the Jets to name Rex Ryan their head coach. Isn't that what he thought? Speaking of head coaching moves, I need to get one of those little 40s. Hey, we got big news now coming out down the. I almost said something really bad. Water faucets are ruined by a ruling. No, I'm kidding. I'll never go to the bathroom in the public again. But anyway, it looks like the Bears
on MLK Day. Good job.
Wow. Hey. This is also in Alabama and Mississippi. No lie. This is also Robert E. Lee Day.
Oh,
just saying.
Wow.
Yeah. Isn't that weird? But no, Ben Johnson looks to be on his way to being named the Bears head coach. Apparently, they're basically to the point where they're just dotting the I's and crossing the T's on the contracts. I thought it was weird when everybody was saying, "Oh, it looks like the Raiders are the front runner for him," and I'm like, why? Why would an offensive coordinator? And I know you can say, well, look what he's done to Jared Goff, but still, Jared Goff is remarkably better than anything that the Raiders have. Why would an offensive coordinator wonderkind choose a team that doesn't have an identity, doesn't have a quarterback, doesn't have a running back? I mean, yeah, you're going to build your offense around your tight end, and I love the tight end there, but it never made sense that rumor was heating up, and it felt like the Bears is a perfect fit for Ben Johnson. Now, saying that, and I thoroughly like Caleb Williams. I do. Man, I'd love to see what Justin Fields could have done with Ben Johnson as his offensive coordinator / head coach.
Yeah, up until the end of their offseason, I thought the Bears were gearing to building a team around Justin Fields, but apparently they were still trying to shop him to the Raiders, and then eventually they sent him to the Steelers. To answer your question about Ben Johnson, I think it's just two words, plain and simple: Tom Brady. Because there was this rumor that Brady was infatuated with Ben Johnson, and as a minority owner of the Raiders, which I don't think that should be legal, that he's an owner of a team and also a lead color commentator. But
I don't have a problem with that.
It's an inherent bias. I'm sorry. It's an inherent bias.
He can be biased if he's biased on the broadcast, people will point it out, and he has to adjust to that. Also, no offense to the Raiders, but he's the Fox lead color analyst. How many Raider games is he going to be doing? I mean, seriously, he's the lead guy. I mean, even if the Raiders make a perfect hire, their roster is so janky right now. But yeah, you're right though. Getting off topic, you're right. It was the rumor but then Brady's agent came out and basically said, no, he thinks Brady's going, and this could be just saying things, but he thinks Brady's going to stick in as the color guy for Fox, in which that means he won't be able to take a more hands-on approach as an owner. A lot of people thought maybe he was angling to become kind of like the funny enough, the Jerry Jones, like he would be an owner and GM. And I think he eventually could end up doing that, but apparently, at least now, that's not going to happen anytime soon.
Honestly, and he's actually improved a lot over this season, much like anyone who applies himself in this role would. But I know he's still not a finished product, but I think Tom Brady's getting there. I think with his mentality and his get-go, and I guess get-go is a term, I think he'll actually be pretty good in year 2 and 3.
I just think his problem is he's vanilla and he's going to say cliches. And that's the thing about Romo. And you know, Romo had a weird, like, I don't want to say relationship with the media, but if you didn't live in Dallas, you didn't hear Romo talk a lot. We that like live in Dallas, or if you follow Dallas, we knew he was funny, he was quick-witted and all that, but he didn't really project that across the nation, you know, when they talked about him and stuff. You know, it wasn't like Brett Favre where they'd have these Romo-isms or anything like that during games and stuff. So when he took over, everybody was outside of Dallas like, oh, he's going to suck, and everybody inside was like, oh no, he's going to be really funny. Just watch. He's going to be a lot better than you think. With Brady's problem is, for me, is he's just cliche. He says what you think he's going to say. He's going to say 400 times when I quarterback and when I was playing the game, when I, you know, and all that. I'm lucky, and you do it too, but you do take time to listen. I watch the Red Zone channel, so I don't really hear any broadcasting other than key moments and things like that. So I really can't give much of opinion other than the one time I really listened to him. I think it was I can't remember what game it was with Dallas. It was still early when we had kind of hope. And I was just like, yeah, he's boring. I mean, he's not bad.
Well, he did cover the first game, the Brown game.
That probably was what it was when I was, you know, getting my 17-0 in 2024 tattoo made. But yeah, so I think he's perfectly fine as a broadcaster. Let's see if has the game started yet?
The game has started. I was going to tell you, I hate that they have the gold lettering for their names, but I love that. It just doesn't look right on TV to me. Maybe if I saw it in person, I would like
fair.
it.
No, that's 100% fair. Notre Dame with the ball first here with 12:30 left in the first quarter. Moving the ball pretty good here early. I
was going to tell you, I do like the fact that Notre Dame doesn't have that Twilight sparkle helmet that they had in prior years.
Yeah, I agree. The pants look a little too mustardy to me, though.
Yeah, that's been an issue for them for a while. I actually
kind of thought they were going to come out in the green. I really thought they were going to wear the green tops.
Yeah, lucky. It's a lucky color for them.
Well, I mean, that's their special, you know, we only wear it. You know, I think they kind of bashed that in a few years ago when they wore it multiple times, but I really was expecting the greens. I thought that'd have been a cool little thing as they tried to go for it. I can't tell third down, sorry. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about coaching and the Cowboys. You know, so far we know for sure Kellen Moore has interviewed, Robert Saleh has interviewed. Supposedly, rumors are that Anthony Lynn, former Chargers head coach, who lived in Dallas, his son, who now is the defensive coordinator at USC, played for Salina, which, if you're not in Dallas, it's a suburb, or it's a suburb of a suburb of a suburb of Dallas. And so accounts are that they might be interested in him. It feels like the Deion Sanders talk has kind of died down. I actually heard that they're going to interview Brian Schottenheimer. I hope that's just courtesy. Because, I mean, that dude's he's barely been a coordinator. I'm just assuming it's courtesy. And then late reports are that Aaron Glenn and the Cowboys might be going for an interview. I mean, so far, kind of where we thought it was going to be right now. I don't think Dallas is in a hurry to make a decision.
I'm kind of curious of Brian Ball, take after his dad, Marty Ball, Brian Ball.
I'm ending the show right now. I'm finding a new host. I hate you.
No, and all kidding aside, it's Martin Luther King Day. Also, yep. President Trump got inaugurated today. Watching the first black head coach coach the national championship game in college football. Cowboys are, by all media reports, they might actually be hiring their first black head coach in the 65-year history of the franchise. So
it's going to be Kellen Moore.
That's going to be Kellen Moore.
I'm going to stick with what I said last week when we did our first closing time, which is, by the way, that's our new Patreon show. And it's not just Outdrank the coverage. It's an L4 show. There will be some high school stuff, some college stuff, some pop culture stuff. I mean, it's just kind of when I have a bug up my butt about something I want to talk about, or if somebody else has something, or if me and you together, we'll pop it on. Eventually, I would like to roll it into more of a daily, just kind of recapping the sports / whatever world. Now, we did talk about Jason Witten. There has been a couple rumors that supposedly one of the things that might have led Mike McCarthy to walk away was Jerry being Jerry and saying, hey, we want to keep you, but you're going to have to take Jason Witten under your wing, and he's your heir apparent. It's like, and I don't blame Mike. You don't do that. Texas tried that with Mac Brown and Will Muschamp. That lasted like a year and a half. It never worked. I'm not gonna say it never works. It rarely works. And especially when you're literally telling, with Mac, at least Mac had been there for 15 years. He'd won a national title. He'd played it, for another national title. You could see the end of that career. Nobody knew he would end up going to UNC for another 7 years. But at that time, you could kind of see it winding down. So, okay, let's get this young guy in. Mike McCarthy doesn't, he's what, 61? I mean, he's not at the age. I mean, we're NFL head coaches, 70's not that big of a stretch. And I don't think Mike McCarthy wanted to have what if I win 2 Super Bowls in 5 years? Am I still going to be out the door? So I don't blame Mike if that's the reason. I don't know how true that is. It's also been said that he didn't like the years, like he felt they were too short. But it does sound like Mike walked away from the table that at least makes up for why did Jerry and them block the Bears if they didn't want him? It sounds like Mike walked away and not Jerry walk away.
That's what it does sound like to me. And you have to remember, this is the second time Jerry Jones has made this proposition to Mike McCarthy. In 2020, Mike McCarthy, when was he interviewing, Jerry Jones basically said, hey, we want Kellen Moore on your staff.
Yeah.
And now Kellen Moore is good, but it wasn't something that was Mike McCarthy's choice.
And I want to point something out right there. So we get talking. Troy Aikman made the correct statement about how hard it is to win right now, and with Jerry, and you've got to figure that out. And Jason Garrett kind of said the same thing, like, hey, it's tough. I had to do it. But everybody keeps talking about like Mike McCarthy was a puppet. Nothing that he did was a puppet. I mean, the very fact that he told them, in 2022, like, hey, no, I don't want him as my offensive coordinator anymore. I'm calling plays. If I've got to ride or die with this job, I want to be the guy doing it. And Jerry let him do it. So I do want to point that out. Look, Jerry's a lot of things, but I think the whole puppet thing, it's very, very over talk. I don't think Jerry's a puppet master. Al Davis was a puppet master. Jerry's issues are a lot of other things that we will get into in the offseason. I think it's, a lot of it's just luck sometimes. Again, 2014, the catch, 2016, play a little bit better defense, things like that. But I want to turn my attention to now, where are we at now? We are, Notre Dame's driving very well.
I might be behind on you. I'm about 7 minutes left. It's 3rd and 3. Notre Dame. Okay. It's 3rd and 3. I think first down markers at the 4.
Yeah, it's at the 4-yard line. So we're going to jump around here tonight. Jump around. I want to go to the Detroit-Washington game because I said something to you after the game. I said, the seat's going to start warming up now for Dan Campbell. And you were like, no. Yeah, it is. It's already starting. You're already starting to get all right, Dan, it was cute what you did. But last year you basically shit the NFC championship game away with some stupid calls. This one, it wasn't as much. I mean, you couldn't say, well, the stupid call of the trick play that Jameson Williams threw an interception on. And they've tried that play with him a couple times. I don't ever remember it working. A 4th and 1 here. We got to stick right here. 4th and 1, 6:11 left in the first quarter. Notre Dame driving, going for it, or at least looking to go for it. 7 seconds left on the play clock. Let's see if they get the snap off. They do. They are going for it, and they get it. All right, so I do think, I mean, and I'm not saying Dan Campbell's in any trouble this year. Don't get me wrong. But if they don't get to the NFC title game next year, and especially if he loses Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, and he has to figure out how to replace them, yeah, I definitely think that this game took a huge mark in the Dan Campbell reputation.
Now, there's the argument that I could probably listen to because, yeah, it will be tough. Just like what Nick Sirianni dealt with at the end of 2023 when he lost both of his coordinators to, Jonathan Gannon to Arizona, Shane Steichen to the Colts. There was a regression.
Touchdown Notre Dame.
Oh, man, nice. Riley Leonard. If you let him run, Notre Dame's offense is lethal. Ohio State has to create a pocket there, force him to throw the ball. If you're going to lose Ohio State, it's because of Riley Leonard's arm. If you lose it because of his legs, shame on you, Ryan Day. Peace out.
Yep.
Okay, so like what I said, the Eagles comparison. Going into 2025, there's a good chance Aaron Glenn won't be there as defensive coordinator. Whether he takes the Cowboy job or the Jets job, he was a former coach. He was a former player there. He got drafted by the Jets back in the 90s. Wherever he goes, I think he becomes a head coach in 2025. So if Dan Campbell can't replace him with current staff, he's going to have to get someone from the outside. A lot of times when these coaches go to organizations, they try to bring one of their favorite assistants that they work with. Yeah. So it's a battle between the former OC and the current head coach to retain some of the staff.
If I was Dan Campbell, now the problem with this one is you have to see how the head coaching jobs shake out. But if he doesn't get a head coaching job, and I don't think he will unless he gets desperate and goes to the Raiders, one of the guys I'd call is Mike McCarthy as my offensive coordinator.
Yeah. I mean, the thought is that is a good one. That is a left field one to me because I feel everybody thinks Mike McCarthy is a really good head coach with a good background, good experience, like we covered in our closing time show on Patreon. Having said that, if the unthinkable happens, if he doesn't get a head coaching job, I could definitely see him working magic in Detroit with Goff and all that talent along the line, the two running backs, tight end, multiple receivers. Yeah, that would be a good spot for Mike McCarthy for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's a valid spot. And I think he could do good things with him. But I want to go back to Dan Campbell, and this is why I was saying this. Detroit now is not the upstart. They're the team that got upset. They are the laughing stock of the offseason. You're the number one seed, and not only did you get beat at home, but you got thumped. I mean, the score was a little bit closer earlier, but that wasn't too far off from the 7 seed beating the 2 seed last year with Green Bay beating Dallas. Now, again, the Lions played better in that first quarter, but I mean, in that second quarter, they got boat raced. At 31-21 felt like 31-0 by the time it got through, because you realized, holy crap, as long as Washington doesn't start spitting the bit, and this is why I'm still not sold on Aaron Glenn, but if Washington doesn't start spitting the bit and turning the ball over, the Lions will not be able to match them score for score. And we're talking about the freaking Detroit Lions, who led the league in points per by a 3 or 4 point margin.
I give Detroit the pass and Aaron Glenn a pass. The enormous amount of injuries they had on defense.
That wasn't affecting them when they were going to the number one seed. I mean, you can't. It can't be both. How were they winning when they were the number one seed and beating supposedly good teams? Now, maybe we realize that the NFC North wasn't what we thought they were. Maybe the Lions aren't as good as we think they are. But again, that's also coaching. I mean, maybe the coaching. Maybe, the Lions have, and this is not a bad thing, dude. We've lived it as Cowboy fans. We saw it in 2007. We saw it in 2016, where everything breaks your way in the regular season. You and I now realize, wait, we said it last year with Dallas and Green Bay. Everything has broke Dallas's way. Oh, crap, we're getting beat in this division round, aren't we? It's exactly what happened to Detroit.
Kind of like the 2007 Mavericks when they played Golden State in the first round. the
Oh God,
67 win
everybody
Mavericks.
see that one. That was the weirdest 67 win team of all time because they never looked it. They never were really dominating, even though they won 78% of their games. It was weird. But no, I do think next year questions are on Detroit. Is the ceiling for Jared Goff, where it is? Because I'll contend he has a better offense around him now than he did with the Rams when they made it to the Super Bowl. I mean, this offense is built to do anything you need. Power run game, speed run game, throw down the field, throw short, throw to the tight end. I mean, this offense has one weakness, and I don't even know if it's a weakness, but if there's a weakness, it is quarterback play.
Man. I mean, Goff didn't have the best game for sure. I mean, 3 of his so he had 5 turnovers in this game. 3 of them resulted in touchdowns. The other 2 were bookended in the halves. So the end of the first half he threw one, end of the game he threw one. So yeah, I mean, I kind of get that. Yeah, man, I just Goff the last 2 or 3 years has been viewed as a top 3 NFC quarterback. I don't know if that's saying something about him and him improving or the depleted amount of elite quarterbacks in the NFC. But say all that, I really think Detroit's still on the right path. I'm curious to see what's going to happen in 2025 with the new coordinators and how that affects the offense and especially the defense too. If they have a big regression, like, hey, they don't make the playoffs, they have a losing record, then I might start seeing your side of it where
they don't make the playoffs next year unless they did have this amount of injuries. And again, I'm not saying the injuries don't count, but I'm just saying they were having those injuries all year long and rocking and rolling. If they don't make the playoffs next year, I don't think Dan Campbell survives. Like he's out.
Detroit's never had this level of consistent success. He's going to survive.
That's why he won't survive.
I just don't see it happening, man. But I definitely could be wrong. They even lost one of their top defensive players to a broken arm. That was gruesome.
Oh my God! Did you see that?
It broke like right here.
Yeah, you can. So to explain it, you can go look it up. But he's laying with his arm stretched, but it looks like he's flexing because it looks like there's muscle. No, that's the bone. That is the bone sticking out of the skin. No, I'm not. And going back to Campbell, what I'm saying is, with the talent they have, if they don't make the playoffs, it'll be for 2 reasons. Either the coordinators didn't hold, they didn't do well. That's on Dan Campbell, or this team collapses. That's on Dan Campbell. I don't see Dan. Look, I love what Dan Campbell has done, but Dan Campbell's style is runs so hot that when it's great, it's great. But if it starts to go bad, I have a funny feeling you're going to start seeing people thrown under the bus and things like that. And I think it's going to go bad really, really quick because if they don't make the playoff, Detroit is now on the clock. They're going to start having contracts expiring in the next couple of years that they're not going to be able to sign everybody. So if they don't make the playoffs next year, and again, if it's because of injuries, hell, look at Philadelphia. And I know we could say, well, 2017, they won a Super Bowl, but Nick Sirianni basically took a team that had cratered, took them to a Super Bowl, made the playoffs, yet still a lot of people feel was razor thin close to being fired because the perception of him had turned even when they made the playoffs the next year. I'm just saying, if Dan Campbell, the NFL is not like it used to be. You don't get, unless you're Jason Garrett, you don't get the 7 years to keep trying. I think if he doesn't make the playoffs next year, or if he makes the playoffs and they get beat in the first round, or if they're the number 1 seed and get beat in the second round again, I definitely see Detroit saying, okay, we got to move on. We don't have time. We can't wait. This is, because I mean, and what I mean by Jared Goff is the weakness. What other weaknesses does the Detroit offense have? Great offensive line, 2 great running backs, 2 great wide receivers, a tight end that really should be used more, but he's used well enough and he's great. The one weakness, and this is why it's a weakness, how much MVP talk is Jared Goff getting with this offense? 0.
He got more last year than he did this year.
Exactly. Sure. Because everybody says it's Jared Goff's nice, but Jared Goff isn't driving that bus. Everything else is, and what Jared Goff is doing is really good at taking what the defense gives him. And that's great, but there are going to be times in games where he has to step up and not just take what the defense gives him, but also create and force things and make it work. And I think Detroit is in that weird in between where they're still really good. I still think they have a Super Bowl potential, but I also could see them next year going 6-11 and things going south.
Yeah, and the funny thing about it is we were talking about. I was telling you Ben Johnson should be fired if they don't run the ball over. They only get over 100 yards running the ball, and they ended up getting over 200 yards running, and they still lost by 2 touchdowns. But turnovers will do that to you. So that floater Goff threw in the first half, that was terrible. Obviously, the interception in the end zone was terrible. I don't know if Washington's pass rushing like Luvo and Dante Fowler were getting to Goff, but something was not right there in that game because he was making some uncharacteristic throws. It was almost like in Brett Favre's prime, he would have 2 or 3 games a season where he would play like that, where he'd throw 3 or 4 interceptions, and that'd be all the interceptions he throw for the year. But man, it was just insane. Like I hadn't seen Goff play like that really all season, if I'm being honest.
But were you
well? You know what? He did play that Sunday night game against Houston, and they still won. But that was just a lucky win.
I mean, were you surprised? Because I mean, Well,
I mean, he was so consistently. What he has been the last couple of years has been pretty consistent as far as like protecting the ball, getting into. I mean, because it's kind of easy with Detroit's offense, right? Because you have, like you said, all this talent around you and a great offensive line protecting you. So it's kind of easy to be able to just pick apart a defense when you have the time to do it and the skill position players. But,
yep. I agree 100%. And again, that goes to I mean, he's been to a Super Bowl, but we've always said, and Sean McVay admitted, like, hey, you know what? That was my fault. I got a little bit too deer caught in the headlights because it was Bill Belichick, but also maybe Sean McVay also knew what he had with Goff and realized if I make him win the game for us, Bill Belichick will tear him up. And maybe that's why Sean McVay was so quick to give up on him. And so
that was a weird one because that defense was not good. The Patriots 2018 team that won the championship, they were not good defensively that season. They got good the next season, but man, to me there was no reason to be like enamored because they were. But I guess just the lure of Bill Belichick in 2018, he still had a presence, and I think you kind of referenced the '85 Cowboys and Tom Landry and how some of those coaches that they played against, they lost because they were just enamored with Tom Landry and they were intimidated by his presence, his history, his essence, essentially.
And the weird thing about that one was, I mean, these are guys that had beat Landry before. Like Gibbs had beat Landry in an NFC title game and everything, but they were just, it was almost like they were like, holy crap, this team is getting old. This 85 team ain't as good as they used to be. What will Landry do to make it better? And that's one, again, we will eventually have a look back on the 1985 season because I joke about it being my favorite. A lot of it's because I was 10 years old, starting to get to that point where I'm remembering games and all. But also when you look at who they beat and then who they lost to and by how bad they lost to, but then they beat great, it's just a weird season. But going to Detroit, I do contend though that I still think that they're a number 1 seed material and all that. But I do think that they're about to face that road that Josh Allen is still on, that Lamar Jackson is still on, that they get so close quick that first year. But, man, if you don't punch through that first year, it's really, 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 really hard to get back again. And that's why with Washington, dude, tap the brakes on everything past this year. Let's see what they do now. But even if they go and win a Super Bowl, that doesn't mean anything going forward. We've seen that too many times again. I don't think they'll make it. But again, I think that puts them exactly where Detroit was and even worse though, because look, give Dan Quinn that defense credit because it got turnovers and sacks, but Detroit was absolutely shredding them. And again, Detroit's a great offense, but they were shredding them. You saw the good and the bad of Dan Quinn. And that's what we talked about last week or 2 weeks ago when we were talking about him in the playoffs. And I said it. I said, look, the way Washington wins is they're going to have to outscore people and their defense gets some timely turnovers. And that's exactly how they beat Detroit.
4 interceptions and a fumble will be enough essentially in this game. I mean, that's the difference in this game because yeah, like you said, the Detroit's offense was really good. It's just they turned the ball over, and Washington offense took advantage of it. That was the difference in this game.
Wow, in a sport of college football, which I love, but my God, it takes forever. Notre Dame held the ball so long that the first quarter is already over with 30 minutes in. I love that. I wish more. That's the one knock about college football, dude. Is say what you want about NFL. Our other friend and my host on high school and sometimes college host, Grant Goodwin, always talks about, well, the NFL is boring. I love college football, but my God, 4 hours of football is boring. Of one game is boring because it's like 5 minutes of action for every 45 minutes. The NFL, at least hey, this game's going to start at noon. It's going to be over by 3:05. The 3:05 game's going to start at 3:05. It's going to be over by 6. You know that. But anyway, 7-0 Notre Dame leads with over Ohio State 7-0, as I just said. Philly once again wins. Saquon Barkley looks amazing. Jalen Hurts looked great until he got banged up. But my gosh, it felt like the Rams kind of gave them that game in the second half with two just worst timed turnovers. Philadelphia only got 6 points out of them, but more importantly, it ground down time, and the Rams just could not answer on that last drive.
Well, and turnovers also prevent you from scoring too, so those also killers. Those big plays, the Hurts 45-yard or 44-yard run, and the two long Saquon Barkley runs. You had one job, just gear up to stop Barkley. Go 46 defense on their butts. Just do something to stop Barkley.
When it was obvious that Hurts couldn't move and it was snowing, and oh my gosh, that fourth down. So they have the Eagles 4th down and 7 in no man's land. Basically, the snow, it's too heavy to try to kick a field goal. You don't really want to punt in the snow. And all you have to do, Jalen Hurts can't move at this point. Like he did a rollout and it took him 10 minutes to get out there. And it's nothing on him, it's his knee. And yet they play off of Devontae Smith and allow him to do a slant inside the slot corner face on 4th down and less than 8. I just fire everybody at that point. Sean McVay should have went timeout. You're fired. Everybody out. I'm calling the defense the rest of the game. That call just made no sense.
Like I told you, their defensive coordinator is a Shula. That was the problem.
Oh my God, that was just so frustrating because you knew exactly the only way. There was 2 ways they were going to get a first down on that play: a slant, or Barkley leaks out and makes 3 guys miss, and that's what you have to force that. I know it's like, no, he'll break all 3. I don't care. You have to make the Eagles try the toughest play. And you've got 3 NFL tacklers on Barkley. You've got to say one of y'all has to bring him down instead of let me play 7 yards off on a 4th and 5. I think it was 4th and 5. On a 4th and 5 as we come back out of the half, Ohio State out of the quarter, 1st and 10 at the 12-yard or 13-yard line of Notre Dame. As they have moved the ball well.
And I think Ohio State's going to score in this drive. It's been 2 long drives by both teams, so the time is just burning right now. This is probably one of the quickest first quarters I've ever seen.
Yeah, I respect, like I said, especially for college football. And it's funny because both defenses have played tough just right now, and it's again first 2 drives of the game. Both offenses are physically just rocking right now. So anyway, Eagles move on. This, eerily, I don't know. And this is all credit to the Eagles. They know how to muck you up. They're not really splashy like they were a couple years ago. They're not really fancy. They've got maybe, I contend, I think if he continues to stay healthy, I think Barkley is one of the generational guys. I think, I know Christian McCaffrey's there, but I think Chris McCaffrey's injury issues are even worse than Barkley's. Because to be fair, Barkley's really was only the first two out of 3 years. But you saw this year what he can do. And Barkley feels like he has that build kind of like the Emmitt Smith build. Now he's way faster, but I don't think he's going to wear down. Like he led the league in carries, but he never looked tired this year.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those carries were for big yardage too, and he's always been like the last few years. He's been pretty good at not taking the big hit. So yeah, and especially this year, yeah, 2,000 yards, barely looked like he was ever injured or tired or whatever. So this is the guy that could probably go another 3 years playing the way he's playing. I think he's in his late 20s now, like 28 ish. So yeah, I could definitely see him playing at this level for the next 3 years, which is pretty scary, especially being a fan of a team that's within the same division. So they have one of the best offensive lines in football, top 5 for sure. They drafted well on defense. They got Kenyon Mitchell, future All Pro. They got a white cornerback, Cooper DeJean, who's really good. They got Slay, a veteran presence. They have a really good secondary. They somehow found Zach Bond from the Saints and made him into a All Pro. And as Zach Bond said, he just needed the right fit. He was just languishing for years, just being a role player. And then he goes to the Eagles and linebacker, and he's an All-Pro. Jalen Carter, they hit really well with him in the draft. They really took a chance on him because he should have been one of the top picks, but he slid to the Eagles. You had Nolan Smith, also from Georgia. They got all those Georgia guys, and then Nakobe Dean. It's just all working out for them. So this is a good mix of youth and veterans, and I think they're going to be pretty good for the next few years. I'm going to be curious to see what Washington does, no matter how they perform the rest of the way. Really curious to see what they do in the offseason because they make it to the conference championship, so they're technically a top 4 team, but you and I both know, especially with Dan Quinn at coach, Kingsbury's probably going to get some offers. They still have a lot of holes they need to fill going into 2025.
I don't really think I say I don't, but the Raiders are the Raiders. And Dallas is Dallas to an extent. I don't think Cliff Kingsbury is getting any looks. I still think he's not only had the NFL flame out, but I mean the dude didn't have a winning record in college. And so I think he's going to have to do this a couple more years. And then people go, okay, maybe Dan Quinn next year. Because look, I'll straight up tell you, and my mom's a big Washington fan, and I'm happy for her. And to be honest with you, of the 4 teams, I want either Buffalo or Washington to win. That's the one of the 2 that I want to win. But of the 4 teams that are left, Washington is the one that I can easily see being back to 7-10, 6-11 next year, and not really because of any big changes. Just, I mean, let's remember they won, and I know they lost to Dallas in a weird way, but they won a game with a Hail Mary. They won a playoff game when their kicker doinked it in at an angle where that's usually like 60% of the time that usually kicks out, and it kicked in. They're the team that everything broke right, and it's really hard to replicate that the next year because that's usually just it's a 50-50. It's the same thing with injuries. It's 50-50 on that stuff. Dallas is a great sign. Dallas will go 2 years with no injuries, and then they'll go 2 years where it feels like like this year was an injury-riddled year. The last 2 years hadn't been an injury-riddled year. There had been some key injuries, of course, but it didn't feel like crap. Every other play, somebody's going down, like what we talked about with Detroit and their defense. So, yeah, I agree with you 100% because I could see Washington being right back to 6-11 next year.
Well, or they could be like the Packers this year where they win 2 more games, still remain a 7 seed, and they lose in the first round.
Yeah.
But I still think they're a better team this year than they were last year.
Who, the Packers?
Yeah.
The Packers' issue is Jordan Love. I mean, that's you look at when he's hot, he's one of the best. The old joke is 2 years in a row, for whatever reason, when Toyotathon begins, he's really, really good. But the problem is you don't know. And again, this is just NFL quarterback, but we're talking just the Packers. You just don't know what Jordan Love you're going to get. Are you going to get the one that goes into Dallas in the playoffs and just shreds them? Or are you going to get the one that goes into Philly and looks like crap? And he looked really good up into that point and things like that. But yeah, I agree. I thought Green Bay took a step forward
I think they got the right running back in Josh Jacobs. They got the right defensive coordinator in Jeff Hafley. They got Xavier McKinney at safety. They play a lot better defensively. They still couldn't rush the passer, but they did play a lot better. They created turnovers. They ran the ball well. But yeah, it's those injuries to the receivers and Dobbs and Watson. They hurt, but they still look better. And curious to see what they do next season too. I mean, again, the Detroit could even be better next year or worse. I don't know. I just know these other teams are going to get better. Especially, I think Chicago is going to get better with the offseason with Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams forming a relationship and installing that new offense. Who's to say Chicago's not going to finally take that step forward and win 10, 11 games?
Well, okay, so let's do this. Let's have some fun at this. So we'll do this for both. This is why I love these kind of shows. We don't have 1,000 games we have to talk about. So let's do this. We'll start with the NFC. Let's look at the teams that did not make the playoffs. Okay, so for the East, it's the Cowboys and the Giants. For the North, it's the Bears. For the South, it's everybody but Tampa. I'm saying the same thing for the West. Isn't it funny how the West, midway through, this is back to being the toughest division in football? No, it's not. And so for the West, it's the Seahawks, it's the Cardinals, it's the Niners. All right, so let's start in the East. The Giants still are in. We have no clue. I mean, yeah, Malik Neighbors has now stepped up. This is the third. He's the next great Giant wide receiver in the last 10 years. Let's see where he ends up. They still don't have a quarterback. There's not really anybody in the draft that stands out. I mean, we could talk about Sanders, but I just don't think Sanders is a top 3, 4 type of pick. I think he's going to be a really good quarterback, but I think he's going to be a lot more of a project than people think when he comes in. Quinn Ewers. I think Quinn Ewers could actually carve out a solid NFL Baker Mayfield type career, but don't draft him in the first round. I don't even know if he's a day 1 or 2 draft pick.
Look, man, the Giants have a 3 pick. There's only 2 legitimate options in the first round, and Cam Ward and Shadur Sanders. Giants are in a bad position right now because they do need a quarterback. I almost feel like they're going to go offensive lineman with that pick if they can't trade up or trade out. So, yeah, I think they're screwed either way. They're going to either get – if they can trade with Cleveland or Tennessee to get a top 2 pick, they'll either get Cam Ward or Shadur Sanders.
Oh, they're going to get one of them no matter what. Cleveland's not picking a quarterback.
Oh, yes, they are.
No, Cleveland's not picking a quarterback.
Unless they trade for Darnold or someone temporarily, because they're not going to have Watson next season.
No, they're not going to have, or maybe not Watson ever again. And I would love for them to, but I also, if I was them, I wouldn't take either one of them with the number 1 pick. I would not take. There's not a quarterback in my opinion in this draft that's worthy of a top 10 pick.
I know why you're saying that, because you want Cleveland to start Jameis Winston.
No, I want Jameis to come to Cowboys. God, get that right, dude. No,
why would you? You know that trade's going to happen now.
Mm-hmm. Dak for Jameis straight up, no draft picks. I would do the Pedro Pascal meme I sent you. I'd be like, drafting women in the first round. But no, I don't think the Browns do that. I would love for them to. I think they need to. I think it would work because you're going to get a rookie contract. I just don't think Cam Ward or Sanders is a top. I don't even think they're a top. Again, I don't think they're a top 10 pick. Doesn't mean I don't think they both can't have really good NFL careers. I think they can. I think Cam Ward is one of those that's built. I'm not going to say he's going to do Jaden Daniels things, but I think he's built to be it. But I just don't think I can say, okay, but I'm the Giants with my quarterback history outside of Eli Manning for the last 25 years. And Eli Manning, even as good as he was, it wasn't like Eli Manning was really, I mean, that's that Hall of Fame talk thing that if Eli Manning had no Super Bowls, he would be laughed at when somebody said, well, do you think he's a Hall of Famer? But because he has 2 Super Bowls, especially beating the franchise dynasty of all franchise dynasties and beating them twice, I think he gets in. But yeah, it's really weird, man. All 3 at the top. I don't know if any of them really, I don't know. This is a weird draft. But anyway, so the Giants, they're they
all three need a quarterback. All three top picks. Oh yeah, Tennessee, Cleveland, and the Giants. They all need quarterbacks. So that's why Ward and Shedeur are on the top of this draft board right now.
Yeah, but again, I think, and by the way, we'll be doing a ton of draft stuff. I think you're going to start seeing, as we start seeing workouts and the combine and tape poured, I think you're going to start seeing a Tennessee, a Giants, or a Browns go after a Sam Darnold. Or, let's just get a bridge quarterback and let's punt the quarterback. Let's get us like you say, if we're the Giants, let's finally get us another left tackle that we can sit out there. Kelvin Banks from Texas would fit beautifully. I hate to say that because I'd love him in Dallas. He would fit beautifully with the Giants. He's very much like Tyron was with the Dallas Cowboys. He's lean, he's big, got that base. You're going to sit him out there and he's going to be your guy for the next 12 years. And then next year we'll figure out the quarterback. I just think that once the scouts really start pouring over it, you're going to see both of them start to drop. I could be wrong. Teams could get desperate, but I would go Sam Darnold or somebody like that if I was them.
The Giants should do that. They should get Darnold for now and draft Banks because Evan Neal is not the answer at tackle. But Kelvin Banks is the answer.
I agree. And like I said, I would love for maybe some pot be found in his car and he fall to Dallas and with their pick. But anyway, so the Giants, they still, barring something falling into their lap, and to be fair, Jaden Daniels fell into Washington's lap. Barring something like that, they're still a ways off. Dallas, they're the team that I can easily see them going back to where they were a couple years ago, not making big free agency splashes, but signing some really savvy deals, making a trade or two for guys that people think might be done who aren't, drafting well. And I could see them being right back in contention for the NFC East. I could also see them going 6-11, 5-12, and things really flaming out for them too.
I mean, I'm looking at all 16 teams in the NFC. I only see the Giants and maybe the Saints as teams that are probably not going to improve much. I think all these teams have the capability of at least winning their division. Seriously.
No, I don't disagree with you at all, man.
San Francisco, they had the injury issues, almost as bad as Detroit did, probably even worse. Arizona, they just had a bye week, and for some reason, they went in 6-4, leading the NFC West, and they left, and they only won 2 more games the rest of the way. I don't know what happened in that bye week, but they were not the same team coming out.
But it wasn't like they were getting blown out either. They were losing a lot of those games. I mean, it felt like they're the classic, and this is sometimes the hardest thing to do. It felt like they were the classic. They're 2 players away, if that makes sense. I'm trying to go to where they came out of that bye. Let's see.
They were 6-4 going into it.
Yeah. So hang on, I got to count. Hang on, from East Texas. Let me get my toes out. But you look at their losses after that. They lose by 6. They did get their butts kicked by the not really kicked. It was 13-9. They beat the Niners the last game of the year. That didn't really count. They lost by 12 to Seahawks. They lost by 1 to the Vikings. They lost by 10 to the Seahawks. I mean, it's not like they were, just completely collapsed. They just couldn't win games. I will say this about San Francisco. I totally agree. If they'll ever stay healthy, they have the talent. But it also kind of felt like that team, as we know them, starting to fray a little bit. You saw more infighting. You had the Debo and the Brandon Ayuk thing, and then apparently there was a lot of players who wasn't real happy with what Bosa did with the hat, and a little bit more of that kind of crap. And that's usually when you start to go, okay, it's been a nice run. We made a couple Super Bowls. We couldn't win it, but we're going to have to start tearing some of this down. And then also they're going to have to make that decision on Brock Purdy. Now, would San Francisco go, you know what, dude? Love you, but we can go get Sam Darnold for 2 years for $45 million, or 2 years for $70 million, and we're going to bridge him, and Brock, you go find your other team.
And, Sam Darnold will have a lot of talent there. He actually has experience.
He was a backup there.
He was a backup there last season. So, yeah, there's some experience there, some familiarity. But the thing is, Purdy is still young now, and he has gone on record as saying he doesn't need to have the max value or whatever the market value is for quarterbacks now. I don't know if it's still 60 million or is it going to be 65 next
He's
season.
65. It'll be 65 now.
He might take 40, and it's like, hey, build some depth because we had a lot of injury issues. Let's get some more guys. I mean, we literally had a receiver get shot at. Ayuk got hurt for the season. Yeah, he's white. Yeah, he got hurt. Kittle's on the wrong side of 30. Debo, every year he's always out 1 or 2 games because of injuries.
Christian McCaffrey's always hurt. Every running back's always hurt. There's a guy that's going to be drafted in the 7th round by them as a running back. Oh, wait, he just got hurt. Never mind. I don't know what it is. There is something really weird because it's not like they're contact injuries. There's just something about whatever Shanahan does with his running backs. It's like we're going to find out. You remember that movie Whiplash?
Yeah.
J.K. Simmons won the Academy because he was verbally and physically abusive to drumming prodigies. We're going to find out that's what it's like. He's like Mike Leach was to Craig James's son, and he's beating him on the sideline. I just think San Francisco is and we talked about this going into this year. And this is one of the reasons why I said I don't know if they're a Super Bowl favorite. I think that they were in the same boat as Dallas, just 2 rounds better. But the same thing has this roster peaked? And you look at the defensive line for the Niners, they were not good this year. The defense was not as scary as it had been. Again, some of that is injuries, but a lot of it is.
Going into this season, I told you, Steve Wilkes was not the problem.
Yep.
And they fired him. They got to overtime of the Super Bowl. And I'm sorry, they should not have kicked the field goal. But Kittle was on the sideline. He was out. So, I guess I understand sort of. But firing Steve Wilkes was not the right decision. And they looked worse this season on defense. So, yeah, I know because I had him in fantasy football, and I could only start him the week they play Chicago because Chicago had already fired Eberflus. And Thomas Brown guy was trash as the interim head coach. So yeah, I was very disappointed with my defensive selections this season.
All right, so the other team out of the West that didn't make it, the Seahawks, they're kind of treading water.
And the funny thing is, this was the best record they had in Geno Smith's career there.
Yeah.
In the last 3 seasons, they were like, I think 9-8, 9-8. Now they were 10-7. Still, they didn't even make the playoffs. So I don't know what they do.
So in the North, the Bears, we already talked about that. They're a team that I can easily see the yo-yo. I can easily see everything click this year with Ben Johnson, and boom, we're talking about the Bears being the surprise number 2 seed. Because I do think, and we'll flip it here in a minute and talk about teams that are in the playoffs. For the South, I mean, this is what happens when bad teams start drafting decent. The South can easily go from being one of the weakest to next year being one of the toughest. If Bryce Young and the Panthers take that next step, if the Falcons finally get consistent on offense and take that next step, I could easily see them two actually fighting. Tampa Bay is a lot like Seattle. They're treading, but I mean, Jesus Christ, they've won like 4 division titles in a row. I mean, that's the crazy thing about it. And Baker Mayfield's won 2 of those. But I also, I don't think the Bucs are anywhere closer to a Super Bowl. I think that it would take something major happening personnel-wise, trade-wise, or anything like that.
Yeah, with the Bucs, I think they're just in a good spot. They're like the Texans in the AFC South. They're just in a good division that can mask some of their issues.
I think next year they won't. I think that's my point, though. I think next year this division won't be that easy. I don't think they will be able to mask. I think they're going to have to. I think Houston still. I mean, shit, dude. Houston for the foreseeable future. This might be the Matt Schaub Texans again, where they're winning the division because back then the division sucked, and they're getting in the first round, and sometimes they're winning the first round, but then they're getting their ass kicked in the second round. I think with the Bucks, I think the Bucks are still just happy. Like, dude, we won a Super Bowl 4 years ago, and everybody thought we were going to fall off, and we're at least competitive. And hell, we beat the Eagles last year, and this year they were really competitive in that playoff game. And so I think they're happy with that. I think they're happy if they tread water for a couple more years. So I think they're status quo. All right,
and,
so now
and they got a good running back in Bucky Irvin.
and Rashid White's still a really good second back. And because Irving took more over running, you got to see White do what he really does better, and that's catch the ball out of the backfield. Now, Mike Evans is getting older. Godwin was hurt for 90% of the year, but that McMillan kid, he looked like he could take over as at least a slot guy. So I think the Bucs are happy where they're at right now.
That kind of proves that their front office is drafting pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they have a bright future. It's just there's some pieces they got to replace. They got to figure out how to have a pass defense for sure. They need to bring someone in for that because they're good stopping the run. They regressed a little bit, but their pass defense that's just going to be their Achilles heel if they don't address that next season. Yeah,
and they had some changes at the end of last year and things But again, I think they're for the foreseeable future a 10-7 team. All right, so now let's flip and look at the NFC playoff teams. Eagles will be back. No matter what we want to joke about them and all that, they are built. They're young enough. They're, if nothing more, they're at least a perennial playoff team. Now, but they're also, again, the things can go south in a quick, just like it did last year, and I could easily see them bounce back from 14-3 and then go back more to. And again, this division hasn't been won by the same team in now 18 years.
Since the 04 Eagles.
Yeah, so 21 years. It'll
be
20
what I was going to say is they're a Saquon Barkley injury away from what you're saying, going from 14-3 to 10-7 or 9-8. Or a Kellen Moore defection to a team because I'm saying because I told you in closing time, the thing I liked about Kellen Moore this season was he changed the way he coached, changed his scheme. I love when coaches do that. They don't just stick to what they want to do. He actually was able to change it up and go more run heavy, even more than he wanted to.
I told you last week, I wasn't big on it at first, but when I really started looking at everything, I don't have a problem with Kellen Moore as the head coach at all. Like, I still think that might be their best route. This is a dude that has now had 2 top 5 offenses on 2 different teams with 2 different completely style of play. That's impressive to me. And again, everybody wants to say, yeah, but look what he did with the Chargers. Well, first off, the Chargers were already on fire before he got there. And if you actually look at Justin Herbert's season last year and this year, they're actually not as far off as people think. Again, perception matters. And so that, the Harbaugh and the run game and them not, him not throwing a lot of interceptions this year. He didn't really throw a lot last year. He threw 7 last year. He threw 3 this year.
Herbert did get hurt toward the end of the year, but also Herbert in 2024 saved his interceptions for the playoffs, apparently.
For the playoff game, yeah, exactly. So, again, I have no problem if Kellen Moore is the head coach, but you're right. So then who do you replace him with? And do you keep that flow? And I do think that there's starting to be whispers of, is there a way we can get another quarterback? Is there a way in the next couple years, Jalen Hurts is perfectly fine, but even before he got hurt, Jalen Hurts has one of the weakest stats for a 14-3 quarterback. Again, nobody's talking about him in the MVP race. You're 14-3 in a league that is predicated on quarterbacks winning means everything, and you're not even in the discussion for an MVP. And it's the same thing with the Lions. And that's why you got to be wary of this in a quarterback league. Same thing with the Vikings. Sam Darnold is who we thought he is. So the Vikings, this is what the Vikings have done the last, 5 years now? They go in with a quarterback who looks great, throws great, gets in the playoffs, and poops the bed. And so I can easily see the Vikings taking a bit step back. Because let's say he does let's say Sam Darnold moves on. Dare I say, do you bring Kirk Cousins back?
I mean, he's already on his way out of Atlanta after one season, so I could definitely see that. I know they want to play JJ McCarthy, but if they have a good veteran quarterback in there for a year or two, they would not mind having JJ sit. He was already a young guy coming out of college. He was, I think, 21. So he's still young. And right now there's a shift to going for older quarterbacks, 23, 24-year-olds like Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., even Jaden Daniels. I think he's 24. So like these guys have had success. So maybe having a seasoned rookie or a seasoned second-year player might be the new trend going forward, depending on how like the Commanders finish this season.
Well, I've said this. I've been on record. If they make him the starter next year, well, then Minnesota's looking for new coaches the next year. I don't think the dude's going to be an NFL quarterback. I mean, he's an NFL quarterback, but you know what I mean. I don't.
He hasn't really proved it.
I mean, I just even watching him in college, I never looked at him and said, "Well, that's an NFL quarterback."
But he never really had a chance to prove it, just because Michigan had the line. They had two really good running backs. He wasn't really needed in a passing capacity. Although you could see it in spurts, it just wasn't from start to finish. So that's just how I feel.
If you have a great quarterback, I don't care what level it's at, you use him. Well, unless you're Cam Ward's high school coach and you're running the slot T, but that's why you're coaching down in
That
3.
is such a funny story that you and Grant shared with me.
Yeah, for people that know, Cam Ward's from Texas. He played at West Columbia, and they run the slot T, or really they kind of ran more of a variation of the wing T. And he basically threw 10 times a game, and that's only because their team was not great. They weren't terrible, but they weren't great, so they were behind a lot, so they kind of were forced to throw. And then he goes to Washington State and just blossoms in. But I've never looked at J.J. McCarthy and thought he was going to be a good quarterback. And I get what you're saying, but again, if you have a great quarterback, you use him. I don't care. Jim Harbaugh used Justin. In fact, that was the funny, and I know he got hurt in the end of 2023, but the funnier thing about Herbert with Jim Harbaugh is he was actually used more downfield, more aggressive. They didn't really do that with J.J. McCarthy. That's why when he did make a couple throws against Ohio State, everybody was like, what? What the hell? How did that happen? I'm just saying, I think Minnesota makes a mistake if they put it all on him. I think you're going to lose Jefferson. You're going to lose Addison. You're going to tailspin. I think they're almost beholden to keeping a veteran quarterback that will keep the offensive guys happy.
I almost would bring Darnold back, just not for – I mean, after the last two games – he's not going to get top dollar, but he can get 20 million, 25 million, maybe even 30. And that might be enough for him.
So it's funny you say that because that's a really good talking point. The whole thing has been with the last game against Detroit and then the playoff game that he blew him $100 million, blah, 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 and all that. I have the luxury of knowing a guy who used to scout in the NFL, and he literally did. He's not one of those guys that says he did. Like, I know he did. And he said, they don't do that. You don't really. You talk about can they win and all that when you're drafting. Like, can a guy be a winner? But once in the pros, and if you make all the throws, and Sam Darnold can make all the throws, there's not a lot of talk. Like people I'm just throwing a team out. The Raiders aren't going to go, well, should we go with Darnold? I don't know. He doesn't win in big games. They don't talk in that way because what they say is he makes all the throws, he makes all the reads. He doesn't usually make a lot of mistakes. And so every offensive coordinator is going to say, I want to work with him. I want that guy because he makes all the throws. He has success. I can bring him in. I can correct the couple things that that he's doing in the big games. With Darnold, though, the thing that hurts him is it's really easy. Darnold is great against zone defenses. Darnold is not great against man defenses because he has a fear of throwing to the tight window. And just look at all the mistakes against Detroit and in that playoff loss. They were all him waiting. He would not pull the trigger. He doesn't want to turn over. He doesn't want to turn the ball over. He's got that, what you and I used to talk about Dak Prescott from 2016 to 2019, where it was like, dude, just throw it. It's okay to throw an interception every once in a while. Now in 2021, he's like, hey, I'm going to do that and keep doing it. But my point is I think with Darnold, I still think he gets a job for a good amount if he wants it.
Yeah, I mean, anyone would really want him right now, especially I mean, like there's a lot of teams right now that need a court. Tennessee could use someone like him. Cleveland could use someone like him. I was going to say the Jets, but that might be a touchy subject. But there's a lot of teams in the NFL who could use someone with Sam Darnold's abilities, and he wouldn't have to pay him $60 million a year. You can get $30 million and just build a team around him, like Minnesota did. I would risk it throwing it to Justin Jefferson and Naylor and Addison and Hawkinson. Like, they have a lot of talent. And then when they get Darisaw back at tackle, that was their best player. They signed him to a fat contract in the offseason. Then he, mid-season, gets hurt and is out for the year.
Yeah.
And they were able to eke out a bunch of wins toward the end of the season. But like you saw in the last two games, that wasn't effect. I mean, especially in the playoff game, he got sacked 8 times. Darisaw was a big loss for the Vikings this season.
No, I agree. And I will say this. I can see a world where J.J. McCarthy plays well because he does trust those talents. I can see that. He Brock Purdy's it. Yeah. I definitely can. I do want to make sure I see that. I'm not going to say he can't. I just don't think that he's going to be. Now, I will throw out, as we're watching them, a Will Howard. Will Howard feels like a Brock Purdy starter kit. He's tough. He's gritty. He can run. He's big. He throws the ball. He
Big
does
12 experience.
Big 12, playing in a national championship game, all that. I could see a team that would be drafting later who has everything else around, like San Francisco. What if San Francisco, again, I know Brock Purdy says he's going to take the discount, but I still think there's a part of Kyle Shanahan that has this, but like he believes I can plug and play a quarterback and he's going to do well. And so do you pay Brock Purdy even $40 million a year, or do you draft a Will Howard and you got him on a rookie contract for 5 years? Well, not 5, it'd be 4 because I don't think they'd draft him in the first round. But you would have him on a rookie contract and let him do everything.
If you don't think Cam Ward or Shadur Sanders are worthy of that high of a draft pick, Will Howard for sure is not worthy of it either.
That's what you said. It wouldn't be 5 years. It'd be 4 years. It won't be a first-round pick. I mean, even if the Niners wanted Will Howard and they did say, hey, we want him, there'd be no reason to draft. He might not even be drafted. I mean, he literally could be a UFA. I think somebody will take a flyer on him in the 5th or 6th round. I could actually see Dallas picking a guy like him. Dallas has done decent at that over the last few months. So you got Cooper Rush and things like that. They've done decent at like that. Hey, let's put this guy and let's just see what he can do. But anyway, all right, now let's go over to the AFC and do the same thing. All right, so the teams that did not make. Oh, by the way, the Irish are kind of starting to collapse here now. Had a bad snap on a 3rd and 9, and they fumbled it and they lose it. But anyway, let's go to the AFC and let's talk about the teams that did not make the playoffs, because to me, the NFC is turmoil. The AFC, I don't think anybody is knocking the Kansas City Chiefs, the Buffalo Bills, the Ravens, or the Texans. Texans because of what division they are in. But those feel like there's going to be our 4 playoff teams for the next 5 years in the AFC.
Yeah, the only division I see where there could be a change as far as champion might be the North. I think the Bengals can build off what they did this season, get a new coordinator, really just get better talent on defense. And I can see them getting to 12, 13 wins next season. So, but I still see Baltimore making the playoffs. I see Bengals getting back there. Steelers, I have no idea. Arthur Smith looked like a major coaching candidate going into 2025, but his offense for the Steelers just went to kaputs the last 4 games, like really last 5 games, if you include the playoffs. So I'm not sure what the Steelers are going to look like next season, but you have Mike Tomlin as head coach, so they'll probably be 9-8 at least. Chargers, I could see them taking a step up. Now, the way the Chiefs playing this year, I could see them taking a step back, still make the playoffs. But
I feel like the Chiefs they're right in the middle of that dynasty, and the fact that they're where they're at is just, we can talk about the rest, but it just shows how good this staff is, and really, honestly, how sneaky good the depth is for the Chiefs. But I feel like the Chiefs are not going to make it this year. I go ahead and I think the Bills make the Super Bowl. And I think the Chiefs do the whole, okay, now let's reload. Because Xavier Worthy is kind of been a pretty damn solid pick. You've still got Rice coming back next year. I know Travis Kelce's a year older, but I mean, he has still showed that he can be situationally really, really good. And they've got a couple good guys behind him.
And they've secretly trained his successor.
Noah Gray.
Yep. And Hollywood Brown will be healthy going into next season.
Hollywood Brown. I mean, they legitimately could go from being a team of Pat Mahomes and the Dwarfs to Pat Mahomes and the fastest wide receivers in the NFL. And so I kind of feel like we're going to look back in 5 years and go, man, you remember that one year when the Chiefs didn't make the Super Bowl?
They went from they transitioned from a high octane offense, traded away Tyreek Hill, who will be available in 2025 apparently.
I don't think he goes anywhere. That we're about to talk about them though. I don't think he goes anywhere. We're about to talk about. But finish your thought.
They loaded up on young defensive talent. They got an all-time great defensive coordinator, Steve Spagnuolo. He should not be a head coach, but he could get in the Hall of Fame as a defensive coordinator with how good he is, with what he did with the 07 Giants, with what he's done with the Chiefs in this current run, making stars out of players like Leo Chanel, Trent McDuffie, Karlaftis, of course, Chris Jones, all-time great defensive lineman. Juan Thornhill, who left, but he's making these stars. He's got Willie Gay, who went to the Saints. All these guys you never really heard of, and then they're becoming big stars because they're disciplined. They show up when they need to. So yeah, so now they're transitioning back to what they used to be, where they have all these fast receivers. Mahomes at 30. Mahomes is going to turn 30 years old this year.
Yeah.
So he's already won 3 Super Bowls. He's been to 4, and now he's 30. So even more mature than Andy Reid. I thought Belichick was going to break the all-time coaching record, but I think Andy Reid's on pace to do it in the next 3 years if all things go according to plan.
Well, and with Mahomes, now again, if he rolls out over the next 4 years and wins 3 more, he might go, you know what, I'm done. But Mahomes he's a lifer. Like, he's a Brady. I'm going to play until I can't play anymore. And with his style of play and everything, I mean, I could easily see him playing as long as Brady did. I could easily see the Chiefs having a dynasty run and then a little bit of a letdown. Andy Reid's got to retire at some point, all that. And then they have another 4 or 5 year run down the road. But let's go to the Dolphins, because they're the team. When you look at the teams that did not make the playoffs in the AFC, and then also teams that did make the playoffs, I still don't trust the Broncos or Chargers. They're going to be competitive next year. They're both going to be in the race, but I also would not be shocked if both of them take a step back and don't have a great record. The Patriots they've got a long rebuild ahead. The Raiders got a long rebuild ahead. I think the Browns, as we talked about, we'll know more with what they do with that first pick.
Patriots is an interesting one though, because with Mike Vrabel, I'm really curious to see what they do in 2025. If they come out and still and then they're still 13 or 3-14 in 2025, does he get the same grace that Jared Mayo did not? No, because look, and we had a good show about this, talking about race and coaches, and I know there's a ton of historical points where African-American coach doesn't get the grace that a white coach is. And I think sometimes that's been proven that it's not fair. But I also think sometimes it's just because they're a bad coach. And all the reports, everybody's talking about it. And some of it could be hatchet jobs. That's what happens when a coach leaves, and it's a little shocking. The teams will start whispering to their media buddies and all. But we're talking about even players that know, and they're just like, he should not have been the head coach. It wasn't fair to him to even give it to him. And so it makes it not fair that it was taken away. But you don't understand what I mean on that. So if Mike Vrabel goes 3-14, they're fine, because I don't think they're going to be much better. But it's not because of Mike Vrabel. And I'm not the biggest Mike Vrabel fan. You know that. I think he did in Tennessee, again, that 1 year, first year, holy shit, they made it this far. And then
they never quite got there again, even though they were some really talented teams that probably should have. But that roster is terrible. The only other team, the only thing that they have over the Raiders is that they at least have a quarterback in play.
Yeah, and a lot of people are pretty bully on Drake May, and they feel like he could be. Yeah, I feel so too. I watched him live when I took the London trip, and I saw the potential there.
Mr. Fancy Pants McGee over there.
And I saw him. I mean, I've seen some of his highlights week to week. He has that no fear in the pocket mentality, and especially with that porous. The first thing they need to fix is the offensive line. That is just terrible. That was almost as bad as what was going on with the Vikings in that playoff game against the Rams.
Except for it was every week.
But it was yeah. So
the whole reason they didn't even start Drake, all accounts was he should have been the starter coming out of camp. But they were so afraid of that offensive line. And I'll tell you how bad they are. Drake May had a solid rookie year, and yet they were still terrible.
Yeah.
Like they were terrible. So I think that they have a long rebuild. And to be fair, to Kraft, I think he probably wanted Vrabel last year. But it just, it's very rare for a fired head coach to immediately go into another job.
He needed a season to get the stink off of him.
Season to get the stink off. A season just to decompress. And all jokes aside, we make fun of it. But Mike McCarthy did do what a coach who gets fired should do. He took a couple years and he just watched a bunch of film. And we laugh about the way he portrayed it, especially the way he started 2020, because you could just tell he was trying so hard to not be what he used to be. But I do think he became a better coach because of that offseason. And I think Mike Vrabel will too. I think Miami and Jacksonville are the two teams that could replace the Chargers and the Broncos in the playoffs. I think there's that yo-yo right there between those four. And it's not that I don't like what the Chargers and Broncos have done. I do, but they've got to do it for 2 years. But let's go to the Miami thing, because the Miami thing is starting to get really interesting. Because
before you get into that, where is Tyreek Hill in 2025?
I don't think he's in with Miami. I think that was in the heat of the moment. He's mad. He's angry. Blah, blah, blah. I think at the end of the day, he's going to look around and go, nobody's going to pay him, because now you're Stephon Diggs at this point. Okay, so you left a Super Bowl dynasty because you wanted more money, and now you're bitching that the team that you're on doesn't win enough, but a lot of that's because of your money. And so I just, and I think the Dolphins would outright cut him more than anything else. But I just think that was a hot-headed, Dez would say that every couple after, like 2011 or 2012 and 2013, we're not winning enough. I've got to find me a place. And then, he'd be there. I think he'll be fine. But I think it's time to say, and I love the dude, but I don't love him for his foot. I just think he's probably a cool dude to hang out. Mike McDaniel has got to grow up. Mike McDaniel has got to start acting like a head football coach. And that doesn't, you can't go into pressers sounding like, yeah, man, like, oh, crap, did you see that defense? Like, wow. He's got to change, because the reports are that the discipline on that, he admitted, and this isn't rumor, dude came out and said, I don't know what happened this year. We fined them, they didn't care. We threatened playing time, they didn't care. We've got to figure out our discipline. Dude, that's red flags. That means the players, and it doesn't mean they don't respect him like they hate him. It's that they think of him as a buddy. That's our buddy. Oh, Mike,
and that's the fine line. That's the fun line that player coaches have to dangle, because I don't mind player coaches, but then you see the downside like this. And again, a lot of their losses, like 3 of their losses, were because 2 of them was hurt. But having said that, I mean, come on, like, these are professionals. Well, you think they are paid like professionals, but they're not acting like professionals. But the culture with the Dolphins encourages them to not be professionals. So the culture needs to change before their on-field success will change.
Well, it's the same thing that Barry Switzer sat and said about the Cowboys. He said, I will admit I was shocked that 30-year-old millionaires who had won multiple Super Bowls needed me to babysit them or they would not try as hard. That blew his mind. It blows my mind. I'm a very big into, well, to be honest with you, if you look at the coaches at work, they're the coaches that walk the line of both. Andy Reid walks the line of both. He's a player's coach, but he's also a hard ass. Dan Campbell does that wonderfully. Dan Campbell can be a hard ass, but he's a player's coach. The guys that usually don't make it long are the ones that are too far either way. They're too much of a player's coach or they're too much of an asshole. You know, if you're going to be too much of an asshole, you've got to have a staff around you that buffers for you. You know, the old remember the Titans, you know, the defensive coordinator when Coach Boone would tear into him, he's coming up behind him with his arm on his shoulder, you know, and you know, you need that.
It's like having the dad that's tough on you, but at the end of the day, he tells you, "I love you."
Or having good cop, bad cop. Yeah, exactly. Or good cop, bad cop. Having the one dude tell you you suck and then the other one building you back up and all that. No, 100%. I think Mike McDaniel needs some authoritarian on his staff. I think Mike McDaniel, and I hate saying this because you know my view on perception. I think perception is BS, but I also accept that perception is the reality, whether we like it or not. I mean, we literally have a president that won on perception. Perceptions of where this country is. Well, if you start pulling back the actual data, it doesn't match. Didn't matter. Perception wins every time. Tony Romo going to Cabo. Nobody talks about that when the Cowboys were getting the buys back in the 90s that Irvin and Emmitt Smith were in Vegas gambling and Troy Aikman was out on his ranch the bye week. None of that mattered. They won. Tony Romo goes to Cabo and he's, oh, look at, he doesn't care and all that. Mike McDaniel's now facing that. Mike McDaniel's the Tony Romo of coaching. Everybody thinks he's not trying too hard.
Yeah, it's a tough situation because you can see by the way he coaches the offense, he's pretty smart. He's pretty bright. And I love the fact that, and I told you this at the start of the season, he needs to incorporate the tight end. And you see them incorporating Jonnu Smith, and you saw them play a lot better on offense when they started doing that. Because it makes them more of a complete offense.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can see Miami having a quick turnaround just because of all that firepower they have on the offensive side of the ball. They have a good enough defense, but to your point, they got a free agent from Buffalo, Jordan Poyer. His very attractive wife made some comments alluding, confirming what McDaniel said in a press conference and what the rumors were online, that there is a culture issue there with the Dolphins. There is a party lifestyle. And the fact that the team is based in Miami does not help.
Well, you know, the funny thing is you bring up that word, but the thing is it wasn't referenced like that. It wasn't like the Cowboys in the 90s, like they were out all night doing blow and strippers and all that. This is just more of guys are just late. They're just late. They don't really try that hard and practice. They want to win, but they don't, you know, they're not being pushed. That's the way I got out of it. That's why I do think it's salvageable. But again, I think Mike McDaniel, he might be one of those that just turns out he's really good as offensive coordinator. When all he has to do is cook up plays and attack, and he's not having to worry about discipline, and he can be the guy where, like, I mean, seriously, it didn't work. It ain't going to work right timing. But you know who would be great as his head coach, as an offensive coordinator? Dan Campbell.
Oh, the Dolphins? Yeah.
Like if Mike McDaniel was the offensive coordinator for the Lions, that would be beautiful harmony because Dan can rip them, but Dan's also respected as a former player. And then Mike McDaniel can do the arm on the shoulder, and it's okay, Amon. He's just tearing you up. I got you. You know, I think maybe Mike McDaniel is going to be a lifer at the offensive coordinator spot. Which
kind of sucks because he was kind of a symbol of the new wave of these young coaches who are successful, doing it a whole different way. You see McDaniel with the hair, the way he's dressed. I was watching Hard Knocks for a few episodes. I just couldn't finish it, but it just almost comes across like he's just trying to be someone or trying to please others. Like It just doesn't come across like he's trying to be himself.
See, I think he's exactly being himself. If you know the story of him, he was basically a raging alcoholic. He had a kind of a cross point in life, and I think he's decided that, like, I love doing football. This is great, but this isn't the most important thing in my life. My family and my sobriety and all that. And so I think he's exactly who he is. That's why I think, like, I'm not saying he can't be a head coach, but I think he's going to end up being a really good lifer offensive coordinator type that ends up like Spags at Kansas City. We just talked about him. Look at him. I mean, that guy has been terrible as a head coach. One is a full-time coach and one is an interim coach. But Spags is a hell of a defensive coordinator. And he's there. Hell, Dallas supposedly might want to talk to him. But supposedly he might get some looks. I wouldn't hire Spags as a head coach. I just don't think he has that ability to be a head coach. But he's one of the best defensive coordinators in the history of the game, dare I say.
Yeah, I mean, having said that, he's only had like a small sample size as being a head coach. Now, I'm just looking up his stats. The 2010 Rams were actually pretty decent. That was the team that had a rookie Sam Darnold. They were 7-8 going into Seattle with a rookie or first-year head coach Pete Carroll. It was the last game of the season for the NFC West Championship, and Seattle won that game. So St. Louis finished 7-10 or 7-9. But he was in St. Louis for 3 seasons. And sandwiched in between that 7-9 season was a 1-15 year and a 2-14 year. To your point, he might not have been the best head coach, but like I always tell you, man, like some of these guys, they need a second or third opportunity to prove that they're a good head coach. Spagnuolo has already proved that he is one of the greatest defensive coordinators of all time. I just think he needs a second chance as interim or as a head coach. Now, I know he had that bad year with the interim head coach with the Giants in 2017. He finished 1-3. So, yeah, I agree with you. He hasn't proved it yet, but he's kind of tapped out. Like, unless he just wants to stay in Kansas City for the legacy, the history, just to be associated with this great franchise and this dynasty. I get that, but
and you also got to look at this point. He's 65. And again, I know we said, head coaching job, you're old, but 65. If you're 65, you need to already be the head coach for 5 years, and you've earned that. Oh, he can go 5 more years. But also the Rams, that's one of those, it was legendarily so bad. Like the stories of just how incompetent he was as a head coach, that I don't know if he gets that chance.
He just wasn't ready. He just wasn't.
Or he's just not a good head coach. I mean, again, Ernie Zampese. Ernie Zampese knew it early. He tried being a head coach. He's like, you know what? That's not me. I'm an offensive coordinator. That's what I want to do for the rest of my life. Jim Johnson never was a real head coach because Jim Johnson always said, I do defense. I don't give a shit about everything else. Give me your defense. You go do everything else. Now, in saying that, if Spags got another job, I mean, as long as it wasn't Dallas, I wouldn't have a problem with it. I wouldn't want him as the Dallas head coach. I don't think he's a good head coach. But anyway, so I with the Bengals, it's 21-7, by the way, Ohio State. This is why I knew this game was going to be, even if it was close, it's just going to be kind of blah. But I'm sorry, what team were we talking about?
Well, we're talking about Spagnuolo.
I know, but I was transitioning to somebody else that you were talking about, and I can't remember who it is now. Dadgummit.
We talked about Miami. We talked about Spagnuolo.
Let me go back.
About Zampese, and to your point about like offense or coordinator staying in their lane, essentially, like Tom Moore with the Colts, where he would throw out ideas to Peyton Manning.
Oh no, I know where I was going. Sorry, thank you. That helps. The Bengals. I'm not as sold on you on the Bengals. Oh, they're gonna build off of what the Bengals have now notoriously started slow. Basically, the last 3 years, they've got to figure that out. They've got to figure out how not to be 1-3, 2-4, to where you then have to almost, especially in the division they're in, almost have to run the table. Now, if they were in the AFC South, you could do that. You can't do that in the AFC North. You've got to come out firing.
I agree with you 100%, man. And if it happens this next season, I think the Brown family, they need to look at the roster, they look at this coaching staff and find out what's being consistent since 2020.
Okay, fine. I would take a Dak Burrow trade as long as Cincinnati gave us 2 first rounders in exchange of it.
I
Or
guess give us T. Higgins too.
or if you're gonna get Higgins, you might as well get Chase as well. I mean, we'll just run it out. But no, I do think that that's an issue with them. And the problem with the Bengals is, I mean, Zach Taylor took him to the Super Bowl. Marvin Lewis went 8-8 and kept getting extended. I don't think the Bengals want to do a coaching search. I think
because they fire Zach Taylor, that's just racism toward the white coach.
Exactly. I mean, you know.
I mean, it's the Brown family. I mean, come on, man.
But I think Zach Taylor has a long leash, and he should. I don't think it's necessarily on him. It's not, and that's the weird thing. It's not like Cincinnati's going out. Like, I can't really remember too many huge what the hell was he thinking moves by Zach Taylor. They just go out and get beat when they get beat, you know? Kind of the same thing, well, without the playoff game, but kind of the same thing with what's his name with the Vikings, Kevin O'Connell. He just kind of, you know, he doesn't make a lot of terrible decisions. You know, he just, when they go out, they just go out and get beat. But I think the Bengals have got to figure that out. I think the Bengals have got to figure out what they're going to do. What do the Raiders do? Let's now look at some of the crap teams. What do the Raiders do? If you're Mark Davis, besides getting a new haircut, and you're never going to do that, I think he just owns that now. He don't give a shit. What do the Raiders do, Noe, the commissioner?
Oh, man. Where do we begin? Well, they need another pass rusher to complement Max Crosby. They need another offensive lineman. They need a running back or two. They need another receiver or two to complement Jacoby Myers. They had Devontae Adams, but they shipped him off to the Jets. They need a quarterback. Yeah, they already have the tight end, so they're good. There's the problem with the Raiders is they have a top half defense. They can't rush the passer, but if they get another pass rusher, they'll be a top 5 defense. I think the gap is that wide with them. They actually have a pretty good defense. It's just they need to get to the quarterback.
See, I think if they're them, the first thing I'm doing is I'm taking offers for Max Crosby,
which would help them. Hey, thank you for making that point, because that's exactly what Minnesota did last season with Danielle Hunter. They shipped him off to the Texans, and then the Vikings got Jonathan Grenard from the Texans. They signed Andrew Van Ginkel from the Dolphins, and then they drafted Dallas Turner because the Falcons were idiots, paid Kirk Cousins all that money, and then they also got Michael Penix when the Falcons really should have got Dallas Turner.
Or just drafted Michael Penix and not spent all that money on Cousins.
Or that, too.
Either or.
Yeah. So, what I'm saying is the Vikings replaced one pass rusher with 3, and their defense improved vastly because of it. So, yeah, I am supporting of that. I would hate to see Crosby leave there, but let's just be honest, man. It's Vegas. It's not really a football town. He's not really as appreciated there as he should be. He should go somewhere where he'll be really appreciated, like Dallas. But yeah, he really should leave that environment. He probably likes it. He's probably loyal to the Raider organization, but for the betterment of the Raiders, he should go somewhere else because he can fetch the Raiders so many draft picks and so much capital.
Okay, so let's. Now I'm 100% that they need to get rid of him. I don't think. I mean, you're not getting more than a 4th for him,
which is very sad because he is an excellent pass rusher.
Yeah, he's 28, or he'll be 28 when the season starts. He's starting into that he's too old mode.
Yeah,
and he's good, but I mean,
because this is like a 2 or 3 year window with Crosby at this point.
Yeah,
so you got to decide if he's not going to fetch you much. Then just keep him and just try to build through the draft. And maybe when he's 30 years old, you'll have a competitive team.
Or I think maybe, again, sometimes it's not you, it's us, but you've been through the
text.
Well, yeah, you've been through the sludge, Crosby, and you got too much stank on you. We need to We need to completely start over there and just and it's nothing he's done wrong. Like I said, he's been the consummate professional.
It's not him, it's you. I know.
Yeah, it's all me. It's me. But like, what are they going to do at quarterback? What are they going to do at running back? I mean, it's
you got to pick your poison. Like some is going to be free agency, some is going to be through the draft. You got to figure out, okay, so what's our temporary solution? Free agency. What's our long-term solution? Draft. And it just depends on what position you wanting to prioritize.
And again, they do the most Raider thing and win 2 games late, and it's like they're not even a top 5. They're picking 6, which you should get a great depth guy or a starting guy. And the great thing is they have so many needs, but they're also needs like, okay, quarterback, wide receiver, running back, cornerback, defense. They're going to take Janty. I'm calling it now. That's the most Raider thing.
He might end up being like a Troy Davis. For those people I don't know, he was a great Iowa State running back in the 90s, and he flamed out because he went to the wrong place, and it was the Saints.
Ended up with the Saints. I think Janty's going to be a really good running back. I think Janty maybe not on the level of Barkley, but I think he's going to be close. But you and I have talked about this, and I know a lot of Cowboy fans want him. And just like with Zeke, I wouldn't hate it if he's a Cowboy, but if they take him in the first round, then they're just repeating the same things they did with Zeke. And in 5 years, we're going to be doing the same dance. But I could also see the Raiders taking him because, I mean,
dude, that is a good point because I could see Janty going to the Cowboys, which every mock draft saying that's going to happen. But the problem with that is, they'll be successful in the regular season and then lose out in the playoffs because they're still lacking something on the defensive side or something along the offensive line, or they don't have a second option at receiver and they're forcing CeeDee Lamb to just take these screen passes and then finish the game with 10 catches for 60 yards.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
But if they get an offensive lineman and they get beat, and we'll be saying, well, it's because they don't have the dynamic running back. I mean, again, that's one of those, this is what happens when you are now the oldest team to not make an NFC title game. And the sad thing is, it's not even close. I posted that on Outdrank the Coverage. You know what the second closest last time they made an NFC title game team is?
I know the Bears made it in 2010.
That's it.
Are you talking about just the NFC?
That's it. The NFC. 15-year difference. From 2010 to 2025, the same 15 years, every team has at least made it once.
Oh, man.
Think about that.
I'm just going to keep drinking then.
I'm going to start. But think about that.
We're gonna do this off-season topic at some point between February and August. What's the common denominator?
Jerry Jones.
And is he the actual issue?
You know what? I'm glad we didn't end up doing that in season because I'm now changing my view. Dan Quinn doing what he did in Washington and Kellen Moore doing what he did in Philadelphia is kind of
Philadelphia. You?
No, well, actually, they're Georgia.
Yeah, Georgia.
It's now. I think again. I do think the question is how much of it really is his fault. Like, how much is it like,
dude? Come on. Okay, this is the Washington replaced their owner, their GM, their coach, coordinator. Got some free agents, and
all of them from Dallas.
And then from Dallas, they got Tyler Biadasz from Dallas. They got Dante Fowler,
Lawrence Armstrong.
They immediately make it to the NFC title game in year one. And I'm sorry, that makes Jerry Jones look super stupid. Because you had Dan Quinn here this whole time.
Yeah. Okay. So that goes back to, does Dan Quinn take this Cowboy team this year to the NFC title game? No. Okay. I actually think we're going to look back 5 years from now, and the best thing that happened was Washington and Philadelphia with 2 former Cowboy coaches. Both of them and this is where both of them left, and that neither one of them were Jerry's fault. Mike McCarthy wanted Kellen Moore out. Said, dude, I got to do it with my offense. And I'm not saying Mike was wrong. I agree with what Mike's saying. If you're gonna, if you're giving me, because let's not forget, going into 2022, it was another Mike has to coach his way through this type. We actually thought if they didn't win that second round game that they would have, but he beat Tampa. So it kind of, again, that's what Dallas does really well. Every 5 years, they're going to win a playoff game. And we're going to be like, hoo, 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 here we go, folks. I think that's why I say I think that's where Houston is.
And
but
Tom Brady's career.
Ended Tom Brady's career, his only loss to the Cowboys. But I also feel that those weren't his fault. But again, that's part of the Jerry Jones thing. So I think them being there might actually revitalize Jerry back to at least let's actually sign some free agents. Let's actually look like we're trying.
And will that even yield any kind of success?
I don't know. I mean, look.
I don't even know what's a root for in 2025 because I really don't. I don't have a feel for this Cowboy team.
No. But the funny thing was that stretch after Dak was hurt and the season was basically over and they started winning gritty and gutty. It was fun. It was just fun to watch them win. I didn't give a shit about draft pick. I didn't give a shit about playoff. It was just fun to watch them win. It was fun to watch them lose like they did to Cincinnati. But it was fun. They were fun to watch. Not because their brand of football was enjoyable. The expectations were completely ripped apart. And, there used to be a time, and before 2021, 2022, 2023, there used to be a time where Dallas made it every other year. And basically everybody would say they're Super Bowl team, and then they would fall to 8-8. And then the next year, they suck, and they'd go 12-4. So maybe we're finally going to be back into the up and down, and maybe this team next year with a new coach, whoever that may be, they'll thrive on the world's against us. They have a little bit easier schedule, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I just think that this actually might kickstart the front office again. I think maybe this will get them a little bit more like, okay, this is ridiculous.
I think you and I are going to have a fun off season covering all this because there's so many different directions Dallas could go, and there's so many different directions other teams can go. So yeah, this is probably the most entertaining off season we've had on our show on YouTube.
I told you when we first started this show the first time, if you're going to talk about a team, you want them to be great or you want them to be terrible. You never want in between because there's nothing to talk about.
So you want them to either be the Giants or the Chiefs, but not the Steelers.
No, you don't want them to be the Giants because if you're too bad for too long, it's boring. I mean, it's funny at first, but then it's just like, okay, this is getting ridiculous.
Browns?
Yeah, Browns got that right drama. Dude, think if Deshaun Watson drama was in Dallas. Holy crap.
Oh, that would have been that would have made national news.
I mean, it did technically, but
I mean like for real. Like it would have been it would have borderline international.
Oh, it'd have been crazy. But oh yeah, we were talking about AFC.
I mean, Tony Romo going to Cabo was national news. Think about Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, wait a minute. People want Jason Witten as the head coach. Who was with Tony Romo in Cabo? Jason Witten.
So was he? I didn't know that. I thought it was just him and Jessica Simpson.
No, it was him, Jessica Simpson, and Jason Witten.
Oh, okay.
They're all hanging out. Yeah, and I think Jason Witten's, now wife. I think at the time they were dating. But anyway, yeah, he was there too. Again, nobody talks about that. But going back to the Raiders, the whole point with the Raiders, I also see them if Sanders drops or Cam Ward drops, they're going to pick them. They're desperate. The Raiders are desperate. And unless Sam Darnold or somebody else, I do like the way the NFL does free agency in the draft, so you can kind of know what you need going into the draft. Like, okay, we got Sam Darnold, we don't need a quarterback. If you do it the other way, then you kind of scramble because you go, okay, well, let's do this, or what about this? What if we can get Sam Darnold, and then you don't pick Cam Ward or Sanders, and then Sam Darnold says, "Nah, I don't want to come to y'all." So at least I think you know what you're going to get. So if they don't bring in a Cousins or they don't bring in a Darnold or somebody like that, if Sanders or Cam Ward, and I think both of them would, or at least one of them would fall to them, I think they take them.
Yeah, I could definitely see that happening.
That's the worst thing that could happen unless they have.
I just don't see them falling to the Raiders at all. I really feel Tennessee and Cleveland are going to pick quarterbacks.
I just don't think I don't think they're going to think that the quarterback position is rich for them. Now, in saying that, both of them need quarterback. Well, the Browns for sure. I think with the Titans, you're still in that weird. Do you just you're in year 3? Do you just actually give Will Levis the ball and say we're going to roll out 17 games? If you suck, there's a lot of great quarterbacks coming out next year. That's
the problem, though, because this is the reason why I thought Tennessee would be better than they were this year, because of all the free agent acquisitions they made in the offseason. They literally built a team that could help Will Levis be good, and then Will Levis killed. Tennessee should have been at least an 8-win, 9-win team.
So this is where you and I disagree. I thought they built a really good roster, but the problem is they signed a lot of part-time starters and then said, y'all are now full-time starters. It rarely works.
Chidobe Awuzie, Ladarius Sneed, Calvin Ridley.
End of his career, though.
Calvin Ridley, Lloyd Cushenberry.
I like Calvin Ridley. We both like Calvin Ridley. I like Pollard. Pollard had 1,000 yards.
I'm saying, and they had Mason Rudolph as a backup, which is a great signing, especially in today's NFL. You need at least 2 good running backs. You need a capable backup quarterback that can be a fringe starter. I thought they did everything right, and they still looked bad because a lot of those, especially those early losses, they were Will Levis. He was being memed. It was so bad. He was causing a lot of bad turnovers that would cost this team the win. That's just how I saw it, man. But I mean, whatever. I really felt defeated by that because I really thought I like to find those little nuggets where hey, no one's really talking about this team, but I really think Tennessee is going to be that team that elevates. But whatever. I mean, it is what it is.
By what you're saying, unless they do a big old roster change, but I don't think they will because their coach is staying and all that. That by all accounts, if they do make a quarterback, whether it be drafting or bringing in a guy, if they do it right, that could be a quick bounce back team in a division that I still think Jacksonville with the right hire is a bounce back team. I think Jacksonville has a lot of good things in place. They've just got to get that, it's just been a weird few. I think we're realizing Doug Peterson is the Nick Foles of head coaching. See what I did there? Great 1-year window. Awesome. You'll always be remembered in Philadelphia. You'll never have to buy another drink. One day you'll either end up in the front office or working for the Philadelphia Eagles broadcast so they can bring you in every week. And our color guy is Super Bowl winning. He's always there. He's just not a great head coach. And so I think with Jacksonville, you bring in a good guy. I was really kind of hoping Ben Johnson would go there. I would love to see what he would do with Lawrence, with Etienne, with what's the other running back? Tank Bigsby, with an offensive line that needs to be retooled, but it's not, oh my God, terrible. So I think the South, I will give the credit. The AFC South could be interesting, but it's going to take I think it takes a lot more for that to happen. So this is just a USA mock draft. USA Today. I don't even know who it is. They're like you. Well, here's what they think. They think that the Titans go with Cam Ward, number 1. Cleveland goes with Travis Hunter. Yeah. That's
that helped with Shedeur to the Giants then. Okay.
Yeah. Shedeur to the Giants. Okay. Abdul Carter to New England. That would be the most New England pick. He's going to be a really solid guy, but that's a New England pick. Jacksonville with Will Johnson. The Raiders would go with McMillan, the Arizona wide receiver. I'm not even try to say his first name. Let me see what they have with the Cowboys. Who do you think they have with the Cowboys? I'm going to say they're going to go with Janty.
Of course, Janty.
No. Luther Burden, the wide receiver out of Missouri.
Missouri, yeah. Luther Burden the third, right?
Yeah, I would not like that. I like him, but I would not like that. He's not a number one. And also, you're not needing a number one wide receiver. This isn't like when you had Amari Cooper, but you already saw. And also, CeeDee Lamb fell in their lap, too. Let's be fair.
So Luther Burden would be more of a potential pick. Like, you're drafting him because of what he could possibly do. Because you could see what he could possibly do with Missouri. Like, he showed it in spurts, but yeah. There was never Luther Burden final form, so to speak.
I'm gonna pull up a couple other mock drafts here.
We're starting the second half in the college football championship game. Ohio State's up 21-7. They have the ball. They just got out of the break though, so it's still early. 2nd and 10, Ohio State.
And by the way, we're going to be doing a lot of draft stuff here on Outdrank the Coverage. We're going to be having some draft profiles that'll go up on Facebook Reels and things.
I loved our draft show last season. That was really good.
Yeah, we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna have a draft show. I don't know. You either might be in studio. We also might do it like. I mean, the internet speed and everything's done it to where we can do one of these shows like this, and it's not that big of a deal. I'm not big on mock drafts. If you want to do a mock draft,
Ohio State's breaking it.
Yeah,
Henderson's. Oh no, Henderson got hurt or tired. Yep. So, but it's first and goal, Ohio State. Yeah, Ohio State, I think, is going to win it. So they won the first championship in the playoff format in 2014 with Urban Meyer and Ezekiel Elliott, former Cowboy. And now it looks like they'll be winning the first championship in the 12-team playoff format.
All right, so another mock draft. This is from the Sporting News, which, by the way, it's not really the Sporting News anymore. It's just a name. They have Tennessee taking Hunter number 1, Cleveland taking Abdul Carter, the Giants taking Sanders, New England taking the Arizona wide receiver, Jacksonville taking Will Campbell, the Raiders taking Cam Moore. That's what we talk about. We think if there's any one of them are left, the Raiders are definitely taking them.
That would be a wet dream for the Raiders if they could do that.
And then the Cowboys, they're going with the Ashton Jeanty.
So it really all depends on what Tennessee does with that first pick, because like I told you, I think Tennessee and Cleveland go for quarterbacks, but if Tennessee goes with the Travis Hunter, and then that would be perfect.
Again, I will say if when free agency opens up and either Darnold or anybody that quarterbacks that could be in play aren't in play, well then I definitely think we're going to see quarterbacks go off the board early. But I think
dude, Abdul Carter paired with Myles Garrett in Cleveland.
That'd be scary, dude.
Ooh.
That'd be scary.
Even injured playing against Notre Dame in that semifinal. Whoo. That dude's a beast.
Abdul Carter, I would have no problem if he dropped to Dallas.
I wish.
Because then you put him across from Micah Parsons, and then maybe you're telling DeMarcus Lawrence, hey, we're going to re-sign you for a lower deal.
Yeah.
All we need is 15 snaps a game, buddy. And DeMarcus Lawrence's career. Because I'm going to tell you this. I felt after seeing the first 2 games, DeMarcus Lawrence was about to have a renaissance year. He was living in the backfield. He had 3 sacks in 2 games. He looked like he was ready, and then he got hurt. And again, that's an issue. That's been an issue with him lately. But yeah, Abdul Carter to the Cowboys, I'd have no problem with that. But I still think that it all depends on where Darnold ends up, where Kirk Cousins ends up.
It'll be the domino effect after that.
Does somebody finally give Cooper Rush a starting job? Does somebody try to Trey Lance? Trey Lance is a free agent. Does somebody go, hey, everybody wants to make fun of when he threw the 3 interceptions in that preseason game. But what nobody talked about was he threw for like 380 yards, 3 touchdowns, and I think he ran for like 90 yards. And then in that that Washington Commandos last game of the year, he didn't play bad. He didn't play great, but he didn't play bad. He had Washington. I mean, it looked like there for a minute how crazy would that have been if it had been
down Ohio State?
Yeah, that's it. Would have been crazy if that had been a repeat of the Cowboys Super Bowl where the Washington swept them, but Dallas wins the Super Bowl and Washington didn't even make the playoffs. Yeah, So, maybe Trey Lance, I could see the Raiders doing that. I can see the Raiders taking a flyer out on Trey Lance. Screw it. What's it hurt? Even taking a flyer on him and drafting a quarterback. Because then you could be like, hey, Lance, you're young enough. Let's see what you can do. Sanders or Ward, y'all sit for a year.
Man, I'm just thinking of that Sporting News mock draft. Just thinking of the Titans not picking a quarterback is just, it baffles me, man.
Well, again, I think the idea, let me see if they say anything.
Because, like, to your point, like they might be thinking like you. They might not be sold. And I think they fired their GM, Rand Carthon.
Yeah, they did.
Have a new GM, new mindset. They might feel that Cam Ward and Shedeur are not worthy of that number one pick, so they'll just go with the best available. Best available probably is going to be Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter, or maybe even Kelvin Banks. Who knows? Because they've been building that offensive line. They got Peter Skoronski from Northwestern a couple of years ago, and then they got Lloyd Cushenberry from the Broncos and free agency last season. So, yeah, just adding another piece to build up a really solid offensive line. I mean, that would be a nice goal to have for sure.
Here's what they say about Tennessee. And, again, I have no clue who this dude is. The Titans will be urged to draft a quarterback with this pick, but they could also use cornerback help after both Awuzie and Roger McCreary struggled this year in coverage and don't look to be back. They could use a little more big play flash at wide receiver to help Calvin Ridley as well. Hunter has the big play defensive game and the high impact wide receiver energy as a unique Heisman winning talent. I agree with all that. But again, I think it's also ... as long as they have a quarterback. Or, again, maybe they go, screw it, let's run one more time with Will Levis. Because Will Levis, just like in that last game, throws this just gorgeous 65-yard, beautifully placed, right over the two safeties, right into Calvin Ridley's hands. It's that – I remember the broadcaster going, and that's the throw that will keep him in the league. That's – it's not like Will Levis doesn't have – the talent. A lot of people thought he was the next Josh Allen, real raw, athletic. It just hasn't worked. But maybe they go, okay, let's develop him one more year. Let's get maybe new offensive guys, whatever. It'll be interesting to see. It is interesting because both Tennessee and Cleveland need quarterbacks, but I don't know of how great they look at these quarterbacks where you could see, like you said, a Hunter in the first and then Carter second or Kelvin Banks second, because Cleveland, I think, could do good to repair their offensive line as well.
Yeah, Cleveland went about a decade with one of the best lines in football, but they could just never capitalize, and they would have terrible teams that just couldn't do anything else. They could run the ball, they could pass protect, but they had a terrible quarterback, they had terrible receivers, they had terrible tight end, they had terrible defense. So it was just wasted. And now they're in a position where they have some skilled talent around them, and they don't have the offensive line.
Whoa. I want to do some advertising right here because we are kind of wrapping this
is the last call for alcohol this evening.
If you join our Patreon community, just go to patreon.com/L4 Media Company and you'll get great content such as our new show, Last Call, Closing Time, Last Call. I'm going to stick with that name. I love it. And it's just where, like I said, right now it's semi-daily. It's actually like maybe 2-3 times a week. It'll really pick up more after football because a lot of things we want to talk about, I could do a show or I can just talk about it on our Monday happy hour. But it's basically like our first one it was when Mike McCarthy walked away from the Cowboy negotiations. And so we talk about it. We gave our thoughts on it. The first couple episodes will be free, but eventually it will go behind the Patreon paywall. Folks, it's $3 a month for our Patreon. Less than a cup of coffee. So please think about it. It'll help us. We can do more content. We're going to have a ton of content. Our draft profiles will probably start behind the Patreon, and then we'll post them on YouTube as we go. But this is just a way to help you support the show. We're going to eventually have some tiers where we have different level pricing for different things. So just check that again, Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/L4 Media Company. Other sports, I'm a little concerned about the Dallas Mavericks, dude.
They lost the Hornets today.
Yeah, a very bad Hornets team. Stop me if you've heard that. The Hornets are bad.
They have LaMelo.
But what he has quietly turned into what everybody thought he wasn't going to turn into. I got to give him credit, but the rest of the team sucks ass. That's a game. I know it was early. It was the Martin Luther King Day game. Dallas has traditionally played on this day. I mean, they've been doing it. That's one thing. Mark Cuban, whenever the basketball started really doing it, Mark Cuban always had the Mavericks playing on that. I get that they're hurt, but you can't lose to that team. I mean, not when you've struggled after, especially just freaking beating the Thunder 2 weeks or a game ago. You went from beating the best team to losing to almost the worst team.
Yeah, it's unacceptable, man. I don't know what the Mavericks are going to do. Some people online say that it's just Jason Kidd trying to experiment during the regular season. He knows that this team is good. Yeah, he knows his team is good enough to make it to the playoffs. He just wants to see what works. So when the playoffs come, just like with last season, they went on a roll in the playoffs because he was kind of like tweaking the roster, trying to see what works, and he found a good formula for the postseason and beat some good teams that a lot of teams were struggling against during the season. So let's just see if they can replicate that in 2025.
Yeah, the problem is right now they're the 7th seed, and
that's the play-in. Yeah, that's where they have to play like little tournament, essentially.
Yeah, and so you don't want to be in that. So we'll see. But you're right. I mean, he has a proven record of them kind of dragging through January, and then they come out the other side. But it's still, you just after beating, they've struggled over the last month. This has been since they won. Trying to go back, so back in I can't remember. It doesn't show the date. They beat the Raptors to start a one that finished off a 7-game winning streak. Since then, it's been loss, win, loss, win, win, loss, win, loss, 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 win, win, loss, 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 win, loss. So they've completely given every game back out of that 7-game winning streak, yet they still beat the Thunder. And I think both teams were pretty healthy in that game. It wasn't one of those where the Thunder were sitting a lot of people. They beat the Thunder last game, and I really was like, okay, that might be the catalyst, because you're right. They've struggled, and then they find, but that's just a bad loss. Anyway, anything else you want to talk about?
I can't think of anything. We already talked about Bob. Well, do we talk about Bob Uecker? I guess we talked about him on
we talked
closing
about
time.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about him when we get close to the baseball stuff. Texas 2 team will be back this year. I don't know how we're going to do it yet, but we're going to figure out how to do it. We'll talk a little bit more about that. I talked about it on the last call show. Like he's one of the guys that got me wanting to do this because he was so funny, and he was in Major League, of course, but he was always, I mean, he was one of those guys that growing up in the 80s, he was in all the Miller Lite commercials and all that. And he was just a funny guy. And he was also on a TV show forever, Mr. Belvedere. He played the dad in a sitcom and was a pretty good actor to have never really done it before. Let's see, anything else?
I was saying, like, I got this nice shirt because of Texas 2 team.
Which shirt? Oh yeah, Manscaped. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Oh, I gotta talk to them anyway. But I think that's gonna do it, man.
All right, man.
Hang on.
It's time
Actually, it's not time. I guess
time
technically it's.
happy hour.
Oh no, it's a fever dream.
And smile while
This is the last call for alcohol this evening.
Oh,
That's how
the
my
combo.
That's my mind every day. Anyway, that's going to do it for this edition of Outdrank the Coverage Happy Hour. We do appreciate everybody joining us as y'all did. We had some good numbers again. I never know how we're going to do on these when there's a big game going on. Speaking of, again, if you haven't heard, we'll be doing a Super Bowl watch party live in studio. We got some cool stuff we're going to start rolling out next week about that. We're going to have a Super Bowl menu because maybe we have a sponsor for our Super Bowl menu, and Studio Wife is going to be cooking up some great food for us. One of them we've already talked about. She has committed. If Philadelphia makes the Super Bowl, we will have cheesesteak sliders. And darn, kind of rooting for Philadelphia now. Really love cheesesteak. I know it sucks. But anyway, until next time, he's Noe the Commissioner. I'm Terry, and this has been Outdrank the Coverage on